So now officially, good afternoon. A very warm welcome at the conference, Energy Transition at Your Doorstep, from EU regulatory framework to local practice. The conference is organized by Forum Energii, a European think tank working on energy transition, and its partner, Clear and Air Fund. I would like to extend a very warm welcome to all our guests and panelists gathered here at Business and Science Poland, as well as on all the people who are watching us via live streaming. We are very delighted that there are more than 250 people who registered to watch and to listen to the conclusion of the conference. Well, choosing the date of the conference is always a big challenge. So it happened today that in Warsaw there is a meeting of the EU energy ministers who are now working in Warsaw, and they have like a working meeting. That is why the Polish Ministry of Industry, Marzena Czarnecka, couldn't join us today. But the energy discussion will be like in Warsaw and in Brussels, so I think that there are a lot of topics to be discussed. The conference will run till 5 p.m. We have 3 panels, and I will inform you about breaks. I hope that the agenda is so rich and varied that we will offer a practical answer to all of the issues that will be addressed. And the last important thing, as you can know, energy is such an important resource. We cannot waste it. So in that spirit, let's not waste the energy we have today. I can see on the faces. And start the conference. And I will invite to the stage our keynote speaker, Mr. Jan Dusik, Deputy Director General of DG Klima. The floor is yours. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Good afternoon, and thank you for inviting me to this important conference, and pleasure to offer a few thoughts from the European Commission in the beginning of the afternoon. The conference comes at a critical moment for Poland and the European Union in many ways. As we just heard, the energy ministers are meeting in Warsaw, and energy is very much at the center of attention in Europe. Poland has the presidency of the European Union Council. You're also a country which soon will have presidential elections, which are an important moment for the country, and it's also a moment where we, at least I, every morning when I wake up, I look at the social media and news, what has happened overnight in the United States, what new announcements of tariffs and other political measures were made. So we live in a very dynamic geopolitical environment. We are facing significant economic challenges in Europe, and at the same time, coming from DG Climate, the responsible Directorate General for Climate Action, climate change did not go anywhere. It is still a challenge. It is a challenge that joins the other challenges, and while we are trying to figure out what to do to reduce the challenge of the global warming and climate change, we need to prepare our societies for the future as well. And that is something that we are discussing very much, both within the European Commission, but also this was a topic that was discussed in the recent meeting of the Environment and Climate Ministers under the Polish presidency. So there is a whole host of critical and immediate concerns for the Europeans. Obviously, the security of our continent in the face of Russia's aggression in Ukraine, the economic challenges, and the unpredictable global economy, and the implications of the evolution of international trade. When we look at climate change, the changing climate and the extreme events are increasingly threatening European economic security as well. We need to have in mind that Europe is warming about twice as fast as the global average, and that these impacts of climate change, which we are already seeing, can compromise the supply chains, the production sites, the infrastructure, so they can have very direct economic impact already now. We can also ask ourselves, why is Russia spending billions of euros every year on disinformation campaigns which are targeting Europe and which are also attacking our climate policies? Because climate change is not a future threat, it's not an abstract one, it's not ideological, it's not religious or fanatical. And to say that we need to prepare ourselves better for the unavoidable and to pursue clean transition to avoid the worst possible scenarios seems to be a no-brainer. But while all these problems which I listed are truly global, we know that all politics is first and foremost local. And that's where people feel and experience the impact of what's happening on the higher floors. When the European Commission presented the European Green Deal and the European Union committed unanimously to reach the climate neutrality by 2050, we together set a joint European framework for action, which is based on a fair and just sharing of efforts and responsibilities among the member states, the so-called Fit for 55 package that defines our climate and energy legislation for this decade. The framework paves the way for national and local action. It follows the principles of subsidiarity and the advantage of taking decisions and implementing projects as close as possible to citizens. So what we have to do and what's the agenda of the current European Commission is to deliver on those policies and legislation. We need to invest more energy in talking to our citizens. We need to listen to their concerns. We need to reassure them that this will be a fair transition for them with the policies that will benefit especially the most vulnerable ones. And we need to show how we can lift those vulnerable parts of the population out of their energy poverty or transport poverty. One of the greatest challenges that people have faced in Europe in recent years is the high energy prices. Some of the drivers of the high energy prices are structural. Europe relies on fossil fuel imports for almost 2/3 of its energy. Russia's manipulation of our dependency is the major driver of the most recent price spikes. This dependence that we have can be reduced as a greater share of energy is produced from decarbonized sources originating in Europe. The European Union must accelerate the clean energy transition and promote electrification. We are heading in the right direction. Since the start of the EU emission trading scheme in 2008, emissions from installations have been reduced by around 50% below 2005 levels. This reduction in emissions has been driven mainly by the energy sector and the development of renewable energies. In 2023, the ETS saw a historical 16.5% reduction as renewable energy production increased substantially, mainly from wind and solar, and the trend of replacing coal with gas in electricity generation resumed. One of the most impactful ways of reducing energy bills is to tackle energy use in our homes. But at the same time, too many people are stuck in the trap and don't have the means to tackle the root causes. What I mean is, you can lower your energy bills by having a better insulated home or cleaner heating systems or produce your own renewable electricity. But it is hard to find the money to make the investment upfront. This is why we have put social justice at the heart of our policies by proposing something called the Social Climate Fund. This new fund is worth over 80 billion euros and is intended to break down these barriers to the transition. We are now working with all the 27 member states to agree on their social climate plans, the plans in which they will decide what to do with this money, based on listening to best practices of others and examples from other parts of the EU. This new social climate fund has so much potential to lift people out of the current energy poverty and to improve their quality of life. And I really hope that we can together get this implementation right. Speaking of Poland, Poland will be the largest beneficiary of the social climate fund. It will receive over the course of its implementation over 2026 to 2032, 11 billion euros, which is 17.6% of the overall envelope of 65 billion coming from the EU budget. This is the highest among all member states in absolute terms, and also twice the amount of that Poland will receive as compared to what it puts in terms of auction revenues. We are now working with also the Polish authorities to design their social climate plan and to strive for maximizing the benefits of this investment. And I would underline the word investment, because we see that this should be really oriented to making the transition, to helping the transition, rather than as a temporary bridging. The European Union emission trading scheme has been a major vehicle for funding the transition and decarbonization. Over its lifetime, it has generated altogether 230 billion euros. And again, as we are talking in the Polish context, 29 billion euros alone in Poland. With the Social Climate Fund, there are other funds which are funding the transition, namely the Modernization Fund, the Cohesion Funds, the RRF, and the Innovation Fund. So all in all, Europe has invested and is investing unprecedented amounts into the transition. And this is an opportunity that we need to seize and that we need to maximize. And it is also a business opportunity. There's a lot of business potential in terms of renovations, insulation, in terms of production of batteries and storage facilities, in terms of heat pumps. These are all European solutions where we can see benefits for European businesses, where we can see the lead markets for European goods, especially in these sensitive geopolitical times. So what we are planning to do in the near future is that we will talk a bit less about policies and targets. We still have a discussion about the 2040 target ahead of us, but we want to focus more on what we are doing on the ground, what we can do in towns, in cities, in villages, in rural areas to make the change happen. So I'm very glad to see that on your program today, there is so much focus on concrete projects. This is how we can learn from each other, how we can meet, how we are able to meet our common aims, and how we can do better to protect our citizens and ensure their long-term prosperity and better quality of life. So I hope that there will be fruitful discussions today, and we will be eager to accompany you also in the follow-up. Thank you.
Thank you very much for this wider context. And now I invite Joanna Pandera, the founder and the president of Forum Energii, who will give us also a very interesting insight of the subject.
Thank you very much, Maria, and thank you, Jan, for this insightful keynote. It's my pleasure to welcome you today. And talking about social aspects of energy transition is actually not the easy thing. Last week there was Climate Week in Florence, where I took part, and among the all panels which we had, actually the least people registered for the social aspects of energy transition, which, by the way, I moderated, which was only the proof that on one hand everybody knows this is extremely relevant, but on the other hand it's really hard to talk about this. and to really name it, to frame it, and to really decide what to do. So this is why I prepared short presentation. I don't know, green button. Oh yes. So I prepared short presentation in order to frame a bit this discussion so we know what we are actually talking about. So actually climate policy for years was something which was focused mainly on industry, on the power sector. So the discussion there was taking place among the business association, big companies. What has changed with the implementation of Fit for 55 is basically the regulations, actions which are needed among the society. So we are actually knocking to the people's door and asking them to act. And it's not only ETS2, which was mentioned, but it's Ambient Air Quality Directive, is EPBD, which is the Energy Efficiency Directive in buildings. But there are also other regulations. There are also regions which are more attached or more impacted by the changes which are coming, which we need to acknowledge. And this is something where we need to understand that on one hand those regulations are coming from Brussels, but on the other hand this is something where national governments but also local governments will need to take part of the responsibility and will need to be able to deliver solutions and also like subsidies on one hand, but better communicate with the people so they understand what to do. Also, there must be a plan. There must be a timeline where people understand they have some time to prepare. And of course, we know that it's not that, because I hear sometimes that Poland is a bit special case in terms of air quality, but also in terms of how we basically still heat our homes. We know that building and transport are relevant piece of entire, let's say, climate neutrality targets which we need to achieve. So without actually going in this sector, it will be really hard to make a progress. And the challenge which we see, and actually this is how the also very important argument for Poland to act and to improve air was actually air quality. So it became, because of the movement in Poland and big Polish smog alert and basically the movement on the ground, the topic became really part of the discussion also under right-wing government who felt moved with this really bad situation in Poland, probably in winter at least, because it's not that entire year pollution is so bad, but in winter time it's really particularly bad. And it became something like ambition of our society to change that status. We made many mistakes, by the way, because we invested only in clean air solution, but not seeing actually the wider context of climate change. So this is why actually previous government invested heavily in gas boilers, which is now a core element that those people who invested are maybe not very pleased with this. But basically you can see that it's not only the problem in Poland, it's the problem in Central Eastern Europe. And once you take a look on redistribution challenges, I mean, those countries are not only maybe in a or maybe in the worst situation, like they have a lot to catch up, but also the challenge is that the income is relatively low. So the investment rate and the, let's say, opportunities or how to invest in clean solutions is also a bit lower in this region. And this is one slide where many people say, but of course we have 27 member states in the EU, but nevertheless it's still a topic that more than 2.5 million houses in Poland still use coal for heating purposes, and this is something which is still a part of this clean air discussion, not necessarily climate neutrality, but as said, it should be combined. And how to actually, and on the other hand, the regulations are, let's say, equal for everybody, for each member state in the EU. So how to assure that people in all Europe, people really trust that climate policy is for people. It's not only for climate, but it should actually improve people's lives. And this is something extremely relevant. And I would like to draw your attention to the study which was prepared by Bruegel, which I think is extremely interesting, by Heather Grabe, which basically show, and also a bit referring to what Jan said, it's also part of disinformation. So it's not that all, let's say, worries are related with really opposition, but it's part of it is disinformation, but there is this decreasing support for tackling climate change, which is also probably related with other topics which became very relevant in recent years. I mean, it's war in Ukraine, it's energy crisis, it's inflation. So altogether, it caused that people really started to see also other topics. And the situation, like in Germany, it's very striking that Germany and Poland and in many countries, less and less people say that climate change is a topic. So it is something, it is fact. It's not that we should abandon policies, but we should see that context, certainly. But there are solutions, and what we would like to, and I'm also very pleased that Dorota Zawadzka-Stępniak, head of National Fund for Environmental Protection, is here, because Poland, in fact, has the biggest energy transition program for households in the European Union. So we can share, I hope that we will be able to share good but also bad let's say, lessons learned from the program, because it's really huge. It's the scale of this program is really huge, and it only shows how difficult it is to keep the quality of the energy transition, so people will be really pleased and will see positive effects. So this is one element. But on the other hand, what we have proposed as Forum Energii, it's available on our webpage, is the social energy contract for households. Because once you actually take a look into different analyses which shows what worries people, is really lack of predictability. So the world has changed so dramatically in recent years that people really don't know what will come, and they are afraid. They have this cost of living crisis in some cases, and they have the feeling that basically government, they don't care. And there are some strict regulations and poor governments which basically do not deliver policies which are focusing on single households' needs. And this is, by the way, also one of the results of Bruegel, apart that people still think climate change is relevant. However, the support is maybe is a bit declining, but what they really don't trust is in the implementation. And this is something what we see, by the way, in many countries, including Poland. So what they really would like to have is more predictability, more transparency, because it's also weird now that everybody is moving away from Green Deal and is trying to avoid to say the word green, even if it's for the 5 years it was the main motto. Now it's not good to say any more green, so we say it should be clean and secure, and I think that people really observe it and they don't feel safe in that situation. But what is also needed, because pressure on society is growing, is more consumer protection. So in many countries, there is really very poor consumer protection. So there are funds which are actually put to the market, people who want to do some changes, and also once there is money and people who want to do something, in many cases you have really some bad lessons, like companies who just use it for own purposes and not necessarily to make a good energy transition. So consumer protection is very relevant, but also clear plan. So national energy and climate plans should be translated into really national actions, where part of it should be also what we want to achieve in heating, in energy efficiency. And this building trust is basically starts not only from regulation, but what is a major problem in many countries is lack of data. Lack of data which will first let us identify people who are vulnerable, like energy poor. So in fact, we don't know about whom we talk and where we want to direct funds. So it's number one. So collecting data, in example, also in Poland, we have the example of Energii bond or energy subsidy, where in our view it should be really awarded only if people will get instead the data about the situation, because this energy bond was basically directed only for the poorest. In fact, they got it, but we still don't know anything about this group of people. What is also relevant is, in my view, this is should be task of European Commission to make a pressure on member states to prepare entire implementation infrastructure, because as Jan said, for the next years to come, implementation will be the key, but many countries are really not prepared. So there are no institutions, in example, those neutral advisors who could advise on how to make efficient energy transition project in a house, or how to build transport infrastructure so it will be really like working in favor of people. And social energy contract as a third element, which in our view is very relevant. And maybe like one of the last slides, what is the social energy contract? So apart from this, you can read it at our webpage. But the first step is modernization plan. So you need to show people that in the next 5-10 years to come, there is a plan which shows clearly what will happen with, what is the preference toward gas boilers, solid fuels, heat pumps. It should be also like clear time frame, because we cannot forget that many people invest by themselves. So it's not they wait only for subsidies and will do nothing without subsidies. Many people just they make decision because installations just are going down, or the people invest in energy efficiency anyhow. So really modernization plan. Then financial and regulatory incentives, which is basically subsidies, but also regulations like ban still is relevant to show people, but to give them time so they have time to prepare. Also strengthening consumer protection, as said. In many cases, there is no institution which is really able to address single households' needs when really bad situation will happen. And I hope President of National Fund can say a few words about some examples and challenges related with this. And on top of this, transparency. So data monitoring, better communication is another element which is extremely relevant. And with this, I would like to thank you. And these are our studies, which you can relevant. Not all of them, unfortunately, are in English, but with artificial intelligence, I think now everything can be really easily translated into each language, which is the good thing of the progress and those times. So thanks a lot, and I hope that we will have fruitful discussion today.
Thank you, Joanna, for this extensive presentation. I think is a perfect framework for further discussion. So as I said in the beginning, we'll have 3 panels, and now it's the right time for the first panel. So Joanna is a moderator, and she will tell a little bit more about the next discussion.
Okay, so I would like to actually first invite our panelists, Veli Matti-Uski from Director General Ministry of Environment Finland, Veli, Riina Badiani Magnusson, Senior Economist, Energy and Poverty Practice, World Bank, please take a seat. Marcin Gronsky, Director of the Office of Air Protection and Climate Policy, Warsaw City Hall. And Pedro Gomez, Clean Vehicles and Air Quality Cluster Lead Police. And during this panel, we would like to discuss best example, challenges and practical challenges related with implementation of energy transition programs. And I would like to direct my first question to Veli about your experiences in Finland. So Finland is a bit extreme case compared to Poland because you may have probably the best air quality in the world. However, I see that the monitoring is still quite not well developed. Once you take, if you saw those maps, so the measuring points, maybe there are not too many. So I'm just wondering, what's your perspective in Finland?
First of all, thank you for inviting me to this conference to talk about timely and important matter. We are a little bit different in Finland, and I agree with you. You may say that we have one of the best air qualities in Finland in the world. We have certain plans that we are using to better our air quality, which we have. One is National Air Pollution Control Program, which every member state has in European Union. We made the first one in 2019, and we renew it in 2023. In our situation, I think one of the main reasons is that we have a crucial thing that we have a district space heating in urban areas, and heating includes considerable share of the private households also in Finland. And we have developed that system over the past decades, and it's still expanding to new areas. For initially, the district system relied on heating plants using solid fuels, but we are combining the power and heat production at the same time. And we have had and still have a very good flue gas cleaning at the plants. But more recently, as you know, the energy transition has moved towards the focus on towards combustion-free alternatives like electric boilers and kettles and large-scale energy storages. And as you know, we have some data centers in Finland coming in recent years. They use lots of energy, and excess heats are planned to direct in our heating system also. We have been very fortunate because we have oil-fired boilers in our private households that use lightweight oil rather than domestic solid fuel, which are one of the reasons that we have good air quality in cities. We also use wood as a fuel, but in suburban areas basically, and not typically as a primary heat source, I think. I think I answered a little bit your question.
Thank you very much. And maybe next question goes to Riina, because you actually advise Polish government on Clean Air program. So what's your judgment a bit from outside? Like, how is it going? What are the main challenges? What works and what does not work?
All right, so thanks, Joanna, for the question. And you already provided a little bit of the context, but let me start a little bit on that as well. I think we have to start from the premise of looking that Poland has made significant long-term progress in air quality, despite the map you put up, in particular with sulfur dioxide and nitrogen oxides. So you see that in those single source targeted approaches that you can use to target large industrial emitters and single source pollution, there's been substantial progress. So the next mile of the challenge is these residential buildings that you correctly described, that when you have large numbers of single family houses using solid fuel for heating, and we're not just talking about coal, we're talking about biomass and also in some cases waste and trash, which you saw a spike of in 2022, you obviously see that fine and coarse particulate matter goes way over the limits, particularly in the winter. And so what we've done as the World Bank is we've looked at the situation and thought through how to support large-scale transition, but whilst also respecting individuals' rights to choose the course of their own transition, to not have a dictated program, but thinking about how all aspects and all different market actors can play together. So when we first started looking at this in 2016, and that was in partnership with DG Regio and with the government of Poland, there were some approximately, and it's not exactly a right number, it's approximately 4.5 million, perhaps 5 million households that were using solid fuels for heating purposes. And the picture is improved today, so I think that's an important starting point, which is that there are about 2.5 million, I think that's the number you put, it could even be 3 million households remaining to make that transition. And there's been a lot of shifts. So there's now a registry in place, the Central Emissions Buildings Registry, that will allow you to look at where these buildings are. There are huge shifts in fuel quality standards. There are anti-smog regulations that are being put out region by region. And you can see that the Clean Air Priority Programme, which is a financial support programme, has been in place since 2018. So you see this pace of transition that's substantial, but the challenge is still considerable. So when I reflect on what lessons there are, and I'm not going to talk necessarily about the challenges, but what lessons I see, it's first that I have 3 lessons really that I think of. It's one, which is institutions and governance. This would be lesson number 1. The second is instruments. You have to have them all aligned. And the third one is on incentives. So when we think about institutions and governance, when you have this type of decentralized transition, you have, imagine, 4.5 million households scattered across a vast country with 2,500 municipalities, 16 regional governments, and then you have national level regulations. You have decentralized decision structures and decentralized mandates. And so you have to have everyone effectively coordinated and singing to the same song sheet and being able to be very clear as to, from a legal mandate perspective, where the responsibility stops and where it starts for others. So you do need also this strong and committed leadership, which puts forward that long-term vision for the transition, that medium-term vision with financial instruments and responsibilities clearly articulated. And renovation wave programs, they need all of these actors to come together. And within government, it's typically multiple line ministries. So if you look at the national level, in Poland, it's the National Fund of Environmental Protection, but they need to rely upon the Ministry of Development Technology, who are in charge of the Energy Performance and Buildings Directives and working on the energy performance certificates, as well as the Ministry of Family, Labour and Social Policy that are working on the social policy side, as well as on the labour side, thinking about how to get those skills in place, put in place accreditation frameworks, the Office of Building Supervision. The list is long. And so you need that strong institutional and governance structure in order to make sure this is a coordinated transition. And that's hard because, let's face it, not everyone's incentives are aligned. So in terms of instruments, I would say that one instrument is just simply never enough. You have to have aligned instruments, and I know that Warsaw is coming after, so they'll talk about anti-smog regulations. You cannot lead a transition with subsidies alone. You see how many countries in the EU have had large-scale subsidies in place, but without regulations propagating that shift and without enforcement of those regulations that mean those regulations actually stick, you end up trying to incentivize and trying to move people with carrots whilst not using the full push of demand and supply channels. And the last one is incentives, which is in this type of decentralized transition, you have so many different actors and clearly their incentives are not aligned. So we were talking over lunch about the coal, the suppliers and the manufacturers of solid fuel boilers. They're quite old technologies. How to convince that audience, how to convince those stakeholders which were in sort of very distinct geographic areas. You have regional economic implications of shutting down of certain industries. How do you persuade them to be on board with the transition? So I think the reality of managed transitions is that they're complex. And as you really rightly articulated, you need to move down from that national level target to thinking about how each of these different actors is aligned around that directional shift. Thanks.
If I may ask you, because you mentioned one important point about institutions and governance, which I think is enormously relevant. And in my view, in many countries, those structures do not exist yet. At least they are not prepared for this big purpose which is ahead of us. So I'm just wondering if you could just judge now a bit how it looks in Poland, which you know very well. Does it exist in your view, or what should change?
I'm going to laugh at this one because people always say for World Bank economists, when you ask them a question, they'll point you to a report. But we actually have the perfect report for you. It is called Air Quality Management Institutions in Practice in the EU. And we have a deep dive on Poland, Romania, Croatia, Bulgaria, and a number of other countries. And so we have a framework of 5 different segments, including committed leadership. And I think horizontal, if I could reflect on horizontal and vertical coordination, because I think that's one of the hardest challenges in Poland. I described a little bit this need for the National Fund of Environmental Protection to work across all of these different line ministries. And I only gave you a subset of those. But then there's also the reality that you have to work in sync with the regional marshal's office, with the regional funds as well, but also with all of the municipalities, 2,500. And those municipalities have very different capacities. You have the large urban municipalities or the suburban municipalities that are very well staffed. You have depopulating rural areas with poor populations, older populations, extremely hard to transition. And that decentralized component is one of the hardest challenges in Poland, the fact that you've got all of these different actors with the mandates individually that need to effectively work in the same spirit.
And one additional question, because you mentioned also you worked in other countries in Central Eastern Europe. So do you see similar challenges or maybe different or maybe better solutions?
I think across many countries, this question of how to get regional governments and municipalities where really they're facing the social elements of the transition, they look at the populations and they're really at the forefront of thinking of how these different populations transition. I think the reality is that in many countries, this is a pain point because the financing and the staffing for a whole of economy transition is not quite yet there when you then start looking at the municipal level. What you actually quite often need is you need a update to some of the fiscal responsibilities, but also some of the way that those are not fiscal responsibility, to the financing of those responsibilities, because the responsibilities around environment are only growing in these areas and the financing is still at the older level. And so you see that in many countries, that more and more needs are being placed on municipalities, but the old frameworks are still there. And so the question is, how do you manage that tension? You have large investment needs at the national level, but you have the implementers quite often at the subnational level that need to adjust the way they work.
Thank you very much. Marcin, my question to you, if you could say about your practical experiences in Warsaw. Warsaw is, of course, a big city, not the, let's say, regular suspect in many member states, but also the progress which was achieved in the city was quite huge. So could you say a bit about your experiences but also about challenges, because it's the most relevant, how to address challenges.
Sure, I'm super happy to. And thanks for inviting me. I think I'm the only local government representative on this room, which is, a common thing in Brussels, unfortunately, but yeah, I'm happy to give you a local perspective. And yeah, we are very proud of the success we got in Warsaw. It was a bumpy road, I would say. And it started with a bold political decision by the mayor at the beginning of his candidacy. He decided to create an office to tackle air quality issue, and he decided to allocate huge budget to do that. Over 70 million euros, as far as I remember, to tackle down the problem. And it was a bold political decision and huge leadership that supported us. Secondly, it cannot happen overnight, so it took 7 years, I think, since the very beginning, and many people were involved for that, because people, especially in Poland, in Central and Eastern Europe, are not so they don't trust government, even the local government. So you mentioned the building of trust, institutional trust, is one of the success factors, and I think we were able to do that. We have a regulation that helps, of course, only in Warsaw, which is the bigger city in the region, and surrounding villages. They don't have a regulation yet in place regarding the solid fuel ban. So we are the only city, and our municipal police are able to even to give fees to people for using coal, and that was one of the most, let's say, tangible instruments that we had in our hand. But together with the regulation, we provided up to 100% of capital costs within the subsidiary system for people, for residents. So they were able to finance the whole transition. We had a lot of challenges, of course. I mean, the war in Ukraine was the biggest one, I would say, because people were afraid of switching from coal, from gas, or to gas, or to renewables. They prefer, we live in turbulent times, so let's stick to the source we already know. And coal was for many years in Poland. Coal was equal to safety, security, and a stable energy source. So it is also a mental, let's say, issue. The success factor was also the fact that we are very close to our residents. So we help people. We create an environment. They get a contact point in the city. We even help fill the paperwork. We help our residents since the very beginning until the end of the process. The lack of data is an issue, of course. You already mentioned that, and I strongly believe I have more people working on data in my department than people working on environment in many surrounding villages. The whole environment, tree, greenery, animals, and so on and so forth. So we are a bit privileged, and we have good data that we collected for many years. But at the end of the 7-year journey, we were able to tackle down 90% of the coal stoves in Warsaw. We are super proud of, and their quality is especially during the winter is. I mean, the Warsaw is a good place to be during winter regarding air quality. Yeah.
But not regarding weather.
No.
So this was something what surprised me at the end, the statement that Poland is a good place to be in winter. But I have actually one question, additional question, because you mentioned that you have people who collect the data. But then the question is if there is a system, because I think that in many cases it's just ad hoc collecting data, and then the challenge is how to update the data and how to actually build a databases which allows actually for constant monitoring and following also the progress. So what's your point of view about this data? Do you think that what could help you also, because you actually say that you have funds in your own department, which is like idea of the actually city whole Warsaw, but not each city probably in the world or in the European Union has this, let's say, budget for collecting data. So what should change in your view?
Good question. We developed a system even before the national, let's say, data collection system came up. So we were prepared for a couple of years already. And currently we know every single coal stove, every single one that are still operating in Warsaw. And we mapped over 100,000, households. We know exactly what's installed there, and that's a good and solid base to make decisions and to provide support. We know, like, we have a large group of people under energy poverty, and we exactly know the addresses, the people, the income, and the social status of them, because we cooperate with the social office of Warsaw, which helps a lot. But there is a national database which is called the Zone, or Central Evidence of something, I don't remember, and it was declaration based. So people were submitting their source of heat via internet or via paper my colleagues in my office, I believe they had over 50,000 of papers on the desks to put into the database. And it's not a qualitative database because it was declaration based. And in our case, the municipal police helped. I mean, they were going from door to door, speaking with people, not giving them fees and mandates, but talking about the subsidiary system, asking questions, and that helped. But having a solid, high in quality national database, or even some sort of one-stop shop that we can, reach out for support, for help, for funds, maybe to create that database would help a lot. I think a lot of governments would be able to do that if the funding sources would be available for that, especially smaller cities or mid-sized cities, because in smaller cities the decision makers know exactly who is who and what's the primary source of the energy. So I would say additional support from the regional office or the national office would help a lot, funding support, but also some framework for methodology how to do that, or that kind of institutional support. Because we are, as Warsaw, we are a frontliner, but Poland is not Warsaw. Basically, we already agreed on that.
And if I may ask you, are you applying the unified definition of energy poverty? Because it's still, you said that you know who is energy poor, but then on the other hand, it's do you really follow the income on the yearly basis of
Do
those?
you know the definition? I don't know the definition.
That's
so
the problem. So this is why I'm asking.
Yeah, no, it's like we set up some threshold, and that's the base for us to map those households, but also we spoke with the social services, I mean the social workers in Warsaw, operating in Warsaw. So our transition is or the ultimate goal is to not leave that households behind, so not bump them with fees and additional, requests, but rather to solve that problem, to support them, which is difficult because it costs a lot of money, to be fair. To get people out of energy poverty. I mean, we have a program with the National Fund of Environmental Protection, which is great. However, more and more challenges are appearing during the process. Like, people are living under the energy poverty, but at the same time they have a plot, or they have some not money, but
property or
whatever, which excludes them from the support we can give. So those are kind of pragmatic and very practical challenges that we are trying to solve.
And actually, there is a challenge because many people are just poor. There is one thing is energy poverty, but another one is just poverty. And in fact, I don't see that there is a really concise approach how to tackle poverty. And then how to distinguish it with energy poverty, which is another topic that. So we hope that with the social climate plans now the energy poverty definition will be at least cleared. But then it's really the challenge that we need to monitor that group, because otherwise it will also might be a big backlash and disinformation that we need to do this, and it led us to some situation where we know that it's just not true, because the people they were all the time under pressure.
Yeah, I totally agree, and this is why it is so important to introduce new ways and new programs, even pilots, to solve that issue, and to create an environment in the institution, in the municipality, in the administration, to make mistakes, basically. So to get that feeling that you are able to try different ways for tackling the issue without any consequences at the end. Like, if you fail, you're not criticized, or you're not kicked out from the government.
Thank you very much. We focus now a bit on heating because heating is something what is very close to our hearts. But I would like to direct my question to Pedro, who is running Clean Vehicles and Air Quality Cluster at Polis. What are your experiences with clean transport solutions and also Ambient Air Quality Directive and adjusting to the new targets and what's your practical experience?
First of all, thank you for the opportunity and thank you for not asking about heating because it's definitely not my expertise. Just one thing that I wanted to mention, you mentioned energy poverty, and now we have another layer in the cake, which is transport poverty. So I don't think more clarity will come out of this discussion. But going back to what I do, so Polis is a network of cities and regions. We have more than 120 members, from big cities to small cities to regions. Warsaw used to be a member, I think not anymore. We should maybe do something about it. Let's talk after the event. But we do have in our network common challenges. And one of them is air quality. And we know that in most urban areas, this relates to transport problems and transport emissions. So we see that several cities are already struggling to comply with the current levels of air pollution. And the new Ambient Air Quality Directive will be even more stringent. So we know that we will have to achieve cleaner air more than what we have today. And sometimes what we feel is that the cities and the regions are tasked with the responsibility of ensuring clean air for their citizens because, let's face it, when there's an issue, a problem, people will not complain to the minister, they will complain to the mayor because it's the person that's near them and has the proximity. But we feel that sometimes we don't have the tools. So most of the regulations that are done, and you mentioned this, EPBD, the Ambient Air Quality Directive, but we should also mention the emissions, so the CO2 standards for cars and vans and heavy duty, the Euro 7. What we've seen with Euro 7, which is kind of the last step to clean internal combustion engine vehicles, was not as ambitious as it could and should have been. So we are tasking the cities with complying with regulations when they don't have the tools, or sometimes when the tools exist, they are not enough. The same with the CO2 standards. Now we're seeing that auto industry is pushing for delays and less level of ambition. And I understand that, of course, electrification is going to play a key role, but it's not the silver bullet, and it will take some time. So what our members say is that we have the responsibility, and even more now with the new regulation, because it clearly says the cities are responsible, the citizens can actually go into court, so they have also more tools, but at the same time, the level of measures they have to implement are, as Rina said, the carrots and the sticks are politically challenging. And we see that whenever there's a country that is not meeting these air quality expectations. So the Commission goes to the minister saying, what are you guys doing about this? And the minister goes to the regional or the environmental agency, what are you guys doing about this? And then they go to the cities, to the mayors, what are you guys doing about it? And the mayor goes nowhere because he has no one below. So he has to implement something. We see that here also in Brussels. We see in Warsaw with low emission zones, with zero emission zones. But it's really complex politically. It has a lot of backlash. So sometimes what we feel as a network of cities and regions is that we have the responsibility, and enforcement is indeed key. But sometimes at the European level, we don't have the tools. So they are not as ambitious or even coordinated.
And what the tools might be, which would help you then to talk with people actually?
Capacitation building, for example, we mentioned here. So capacity building. Even bigger cities, now if we look, for example, of electrification and zero-emission vehicles, there's two speeds in Europe. One is Northern Europe, Central Europe, and then is Southern and Eastern Europe. We have completely different approaches. Some of them are much more advanced. Other cities, for example, or countries are just starting now. It's also a matter of affordability. So they're also setting their example and purchasing their zero-emission fleets. They are big buyers. So they want to have zero-emission public transport, zero-emission municipal fleets. But there are two challenges here. One is the affordability, but also sometimes lack of coherence in policy. So if we look into the Clean Vehicles Directive, until recently, a clean vehicle could be a biomethane bus or a natural gas. So the cities and the regions made huge investments in these types of technologies, and now they are being told, now you have to go full electric. So what do we do with the previous investments? So what are we going to do? So this is not clean anymore. The other is the capacitation. So it's not easy. This is all a new thing. They need resources. And one of the things that we are discussing today at Polis, and we are organizing also dialogue with the member states, is that we look into social climate fund and all the funding, and it's very, and the same with the recovery and resilience. It's a huge amount of money that's mostly in the hands of the member states, in the governments. So the cities don't have a lot of voice here. And this is a problem, because they are the one best placed. They are the ones that know the reality, that know who is in need, they know their communities. And seems to be a big gap here, and apparently with the Social Climate Fund seems to be the same thing. So there's a lot of intention to centralize this towards the government level, but they are forgetting the lower levels of governance, which probably are the ones best positioned to implement these kind of measures.
Talking about social climate plans, what's your experience? So does it play a role as a positive driver for a change? Is it meaningful, or is it something what you mentioned actually is a bit beyond reach of the cities, because Polis is actually association of cities, so maybe it's something where you know it exists somewhere but it's still not relevant.
80 billion euros are always relevant. That we cannot avoid. The difference is that there's money, and we need to, it can be a driver for change. It can be, together with electrification, a way that we fundamentally change the paradigm of mobility, but we need to consider things. First of all, this is and they mentioned the social climate plans, the transport poverty, and we mentioned today energy poverty, and for me there's two big differences. Transport poverty is a structural problem, requires structural solutions. So energy poverty, when we talk about buildings, you have an asset, you can refurbish the building, you can work on it, and you can minimize the problem. But transport is a system. It requires a systems approach. It's not as simple as housing. So also requires a completely different way of thinking. So this is not about, for example, providing cheap, affordable cars, regardless of their motorization. It's about providing options, mobility options for people, because there seems to be, and in the discussions where I've been, there seems to be this alpha and omega of all solutions. If we provide affordable electric cars for the people that you showed up in the picture, the gilets jaunes, the yellow jackets that you showed in your picture, if we provide them with affordable electric vehicles, we will solve the problem. We will not solve the problem. Because for a lot of the people, being forced to use a car, even if it's electric or even if it's supported, so what about the electricity? What about the affordability of the maintenance of the car? So they are kind of forced into car ownership where they should have options, especially in urban areas. If we talk about peri-urban or rural areas, probably indeed there are less options, so these people should be supported. But we should look also into the small business. We should look into how to make sure that people have proper options when it comes to shared mobility, public transport. And this is where cities can actually work. But I don't see a lot of that in the discussion on the social climate plans. Mostly, I guess, because the member states are being pressured to deliver something now. The deadlines are very tight, so we don't have the opportunity to discuss structural changes to this structural problem. It's more about continuing what we have already. And this, for me, it's the biggest challenge, and this is where the cities are actually concerned. So the measures that they want to implement are not really reflected, because the context is pushing for another direction of silver bullets and solutions that, okay, they might help, but they are not the solution.
So it seems to be a bit like political discussion, or like not necessarily that there are any solutions, because people just they don't want to be pushed to anything. So or even to, this is a bit my observation, but I don't know if you agree.
Well, we do need a nice mix of carrots and sticks. That's the only way to achieve change. And one carrot and plan and work together. And this is, again, so we talk sometimes about the lack of consistency between all these different EU regulations, because the Commission also tends to work in silos, DG Klima, DG Envi, DG Ener, and DG Move. But it's the same in a city authority. I've used to work in a city. I was working in an environmental department, and we didn't get along with the transport and mobility department. So we were responsible for the EV charging infrastructure, but then again, they were not working with us. or just a simple measure. When you think about electrification strategies, most cities now they want to take cars away from the center, regardless of the motorization. But then you have some city department that wants to implement charging in every municipal building, which are actually located in the center. So are inviting the cars to go there and charge. So these two conflicting policies, they happen a lot. They happen a lot in every major city, and even small cities. So coordination is key at EU level, but also at the local level. But again, coming back to my first message, we need capacitation for the local authorities. This is a huge challenge, and they need support, financial, but also technical support.
Thank you very much. I have my question to Veli, actually a bit provocative one, because there was a, I think Marcin said that people do not trust governments. So I'm just wondering, you as working for the Ministry of Environment, do you think that the problem exists in Finland? So it seems to be that there is a support for energy transition policies, but do you see that resistance? Do people in Finland trust government or not?
That's a trick question. I don't know if I want to answer it. Yeah, I think in every country there's a little part of the people that doesn't believe the government, and they think we are fooling them. But overall in Finland, I think they are on board in the transition. I do believe so, and we are going forward with it, and not seeing it as a problem at the moment, at least.
And there is also a lot of collaboration between different stakeholders in Finland, between cities and government. So how it goes? So what is the link? So does the ministry talks with the city, or how encourage cities to act, or maybe there is already in the cities willingness to act?
I think there's a willingness to act in. I think the major cities are willing to act, and Helsinki has their own air quality program, and I think we have some plans, measuring plans for other cities at the moment for air quality, and there are some measures to be taken in the plans also, but they're in a sentence or two. But Helsinki is one with the real program. We have discussions with the cities, of course, and other stakeholders when we are making legislation and plans, so they can give their opinions and views that we can make the better plans and legislation altogether. Yeah.
And are you already preparing now for this new air quality directive? How is it in Finland?
We are starting the plan to implement it. At the moment, I think it was 26, 27 when it has to be implemented. So it's in the first steps at the moment.
Thank you very much. And Rina, I have a question to you, because you work actually globally. So we focused a bit on this region, but I'm just wondering, because we need some inspiration. So what are the best examples for energy transition on this, let's say, local level? Because we are not talking about, I don't know, big power plants or big projects, but we are talking about this, let's say, local dimension. So do you know such examples?
So I'm someone who I've got an economics background, but actually I'm half psychologist and behavioralist, and I've always been inspired by local governments that take a data-driven, but as Marcin rightly described, also a very people-driven perspective in understanding the transition constraints. It doesn't always require going door to door, but it requires understanding the problems beyond financial, because we talk a lot about the financial aspects of the transition, but the problems go well beyond financial. And actually, when you start looking at the different bottlenecks facing different households, you realize that some of it is simply got a problem to deal with, but I don't have to deal with it till 2026. I'm going to put it off. Others, it's simply, look, there are just a barrage of forms. I like the idea of this program, but there's absolutely no way I'm going to go down that window of application. And so as a local government, you have a capacity to be able to not just diagnose what those issues are, but think again about how to help your citizens through some of these tangible, real issues, but which aren't necessarily sort of solved through these big financial programs. And so you see examples in Europe, but also globally. I've looked at many examples in New Zealand, in the US and in Canada, of local administrations taking behavioral approaches, data-driven approaches, but also hand-holding approaches to supporting their citizens through transition. None of them are fully successful, in as much as you typically often have citizens which are just very difficult to shift. So coming to Pedro's point of saying, well, actually, no, transport poverty, it's more a structural issue, whilst dealing with energy poverty and residential heating, it's less structural. I don't fully agree with that. I think there's an intersection group at the end. I'm thinking about your rural houses that are in really poor condition. You often have elderly residents sitting there. You're not sure you want to invest a lot of public finances into this because you're not actually sure that anyone's going to move into this house afterwards, and they're really hard to deal with from a public transport perspective. So you end up with these really difficult cases where, from a local government perspective, you have to decide, do I let this one go? Do I find an alternative solution in municipal housing? But you need that approach of effectively citizen-centric, structured approach to dealing with those issues. Thanks.
This is exactly what I think you said. Very important issue of it's not only about funding and about financing. It's about actually how people feel also a bit, which is very hard to address. But and this data-driven approach. But I would like to push you a bit, because you might know some good example. Is a master in this change? So can you name a country or a program which is really inspirational for you, or where the change was achieved?
All right, so I thought I had a perfect example for you, and then I spoke to the guys running that program, and they said, you turn up and they tell you all about their problems, and they say, we've got these households in the in rural areas, we simply don't know what to do with them. And so I think in every country you have, I guess that's the reality, that people see. You see the outside of someone's program and not the inside, and as soon as you ask them about the inside, you realize actually there are elements of this transition that I'm not sure I fully would recommend. So the example for me has always been the Ireland example. I think their Better Homes program is really quite exciting, the way that they've incorporated behavioural unit into the Sustainable Energy Authority in Ireland. But it's taken them a really long time to be able to get where they are, so over the course of 14 years or something even longer. And so we don't have the luxury, when we're looking at the 2035 and the 2030 plans, of being able to think about these longer term. But what I think has been interesting in that program is this behavioral dimension, which means that you're really thinking, how do we simplify? How do we ease the messaging? How do we use different forms of messaging to get to your target audience? How do we really make this an easy transition? And that's involved regulating the contractor segments as well. It's involved thinking about protections for citizens and stepping forward in those protections. So I think what they've managed to do, which it's hard to do in Poland, it's also hard to do in other Central and Eastern European countries. They've managed to stack their energy, their heating program on top of their social programs. And I think if I look at that example, it's one of the reasons why it works is because you're using your social policy armed together with your energy policy. And what I see happening in many countries is that energy poverty is basically shipped off to the Ministries of Climate and Environment or to the Ministries of Energy, and social policy is dealt with separately, and the two are not coming together in an integrated manner. And the same thing will happen with transport poverty. So unless you have that interchange in the energy and social policy domain, it doesn't move together in tandem.
Okay, so next time I will ask about good enough program, not the perfect one. Maybe we complain a bit too much. Of course, I mean, addressing households' energy transition is of course a challenge, because each household is different, each people are different also, they face different problems, but nevertheless, let's think about good enough program, maybe. Marcin, but my next question goes to you, and we may also open the floor for the questions, if there are any, so just be prepared. But my question goes to you on how you prepared now for a new air quality directive. So are you already thinking about this, or what is the plan?
Constantly. constantly. No, I mean, we are on a pathway, let's say, not the perfect one, but it becomes better and better. Currently, we meet all the standards that the current directive, and we always had the WHO standards recommendations behind our heads. So it was like, and they are very similar to AAQD directive limits. But it required much more effort that we've done so far, because it requires a lot of transition in the transport sector, which is our, let's say, our bottleneck, because we love cars in Central Europe, in Warsaw, in Poland. And we have to tackle that down. We just introduced the low emission zone, which is great. However, it's it has a lot of, it's very sustainable, let's say. So it's very could be more ambitious. Let's say that's the feedback we have. But the decision has been made, and the reason for that is because of it has to educate first and introduce the idea instead of fees and mandates and so on and so forth. We already has like 40% of our stock, public transport stock, is low emission or zero emission, natural gas, but also electrified. So that's another way to solve that. And of course, energy efficiency is like one of the biggest part of the effort to be covered, and it costs a lot of money. A lot of capex is required, and we are doing a lot with renovation fund, with the funds from national fund, from the EU funds, but it's still not enough, and it takes time, and sometimes very bold decisions. I mean, one example would be schools. We have a huge program from the national fund, but it requires, to open and close investment in 3 months, probably, in many buildings at the same time, so children could go back to schools at the beginning of September, which is a huge challenge. But again, I mean, we as a city, we are also silo-based. Let's say we have silos, depends on different mayor, but currently we cooperate better than ever. I think I don't remember the better times when we cooperate between departments and try to
within the city, yes,
within the city, yes. But as you know, the elections are coming in a week, the first presidential elections in Poland, and our mayor is one of the candidates, and fingers crossed he will probably win the elections, and then we would have another change.
But then the success of Warsaw will be spread all over Poland, because we will have a president. Let's see. Let's keep the finger crossed for the change in Poland. But Pedro, my question goes to you, because you actually prepared a very interesting report about fighting transport poverty with social climate funds, and there were very interesting recommendation which you made. So could you share some of them?
Yes, of course. The first one is indeed involve the local and the regional governments in the design of the social plans. Don't make the consultation just as a checkbox activity. Talk with the cities, talk with the regions. Last week we organized an event for the member state representatives, and they were presenting, for example, the Spanish plan, and they're saying we have trouble finding data and reaching out to people, so look into the cities. They have, and if you can mention, not best practices, but let's say good practices, the one-stop shop approach that the cities can implement so either for energy efficiency or for transport measures. This is where they can reach the target audience, the people that actually need. The second recommendation is to look into a systems perspective. This is not just about cars, this is about providing alternatives. And on this, I can give some examples. So the city of Madrid, for example, is now the first city with no ICE buses. So they have only zero emission or natural gas. And this also increases the attractiveness of the public transport. It increases the users. Of course, just the buses, changing the buses, if you don't increase the level of service, it's not enough. But they are doing this two-way. So improving levels of service plus with zero emission vehicles. So they fight both transport poverty, energy efficiency, and air quality. And the third recommendation that I would say is, besides looking into the cities and besides looking into the systems and the alternatives, is to make sure that when you are designing these plans, I understand there's a strong push for car ownership. There's also the problem of the EU industry. Now they are in trouble, so for them it's also an opportunity to try to sell more cars. But we should look into mobility that is not just focused on the car. Public transport, shared mobility. And we see a good example. When I was in Gdansk, I was surprised by the quality of the cycling infrastructure. Probably the users there will complain it's not good enough. It's like here when people complain about the public transport. I come from Lisbon. Brussels is much better. So this is where okay, I tend to see the glass half full. And again, trust the cities. If you look into Finland, for example, Helsinki, it's a good example where they have their agency, Forum Virium, for innovation, that actually is helping the city to implement sustainable mobility measures and others via technical capacitation, but also participation on research and innovation programs and measures. And this is also another opportunity. Look into the financial opportunities. Look into look into what's already in place in terms of research and innovation, in terms of European projects and cooperation, because there's a lot of lessons that you can learn from there at local level that can be replicated in other contexts. We don't need to be reinventing the wheel all the time, which is a problem, especially in political. It's very tempting to try to find the silver bullet. But there's a lot of knowledge already in place. We should look into it and maybe try to replicate, of course, looking into the context, but try to replicate and emulate what's already there.
This is why we organized that conference. So we don't want to reinvent the wheel, but share our best and worst lessons. But I don't know, maybe you have some questions. Somebody would like to jump into the discussion? Yes, please. Oh, there are 3 questions. Excellent. So the lady in the back. Okay, sorry.
Is it on? Yes. Good day, I'm Stefan Schipka from the European Policy Center, a Brussels-based independent think tank. And I wanted to raise a rather conceptual question, but building on the last point on the financial opportunities. And we talked about transport and a number of other agendas and how we can link it with the energy transition in households. I wonder if that can be done maybe with the defense agenda as well, and the ongoing and upcoming investments into defense, that we see that there is a strong momentum to push for this in this direction, meaning more public spending by public debt probably, and other sources of financing for defense and rearmament given the Russian threat. Since we have this agenda now and we know that this will happen, can we somehow tap into that and enable the synergies? Because of course this is important agenda for our security. There are also concerns around inflation, and also that these funds will then be directed in that direction and not into some other way. But can we somehow find a way? And I know that energy in households, it's a bit easier said than done to make a straightforward connection. There are other words, dual use, for different infrastructure and capacities, defense, and that can support defense, but also the green energy transition. But for example, we talk about poverty, right? Can we think about investments that go into, let's say, less developed regions that can support lower income households, and to think about different schemes and arrangements that can lead to the adoption of more energy efficient practices and technology and solutions? Because we have poverty, we talked about social agenda, so I'm just bringing in one more, which is important because it's something new, and we shouldn't, I think we should never waste a good crisis. So if we have this financial opportunity, can we tap into that? I mean, I don't know. I know it's like a fresh topic, and I'm not expecting, a groundbreaking answer. But maybe if anybody would.
Whom you would like to ask?
Question for the entire panel, or at least something to consider.
So let's collect maybe questions first. So the lady and Jakub.
Good afternoon, Eva Abramik-Litte, Liquid Gas Europe. We represent the LPG sector. Mostly we are in rural areas, used in heating, but also in transport quite a lot. I think it's I mean, the debate it's great because I haven't heard the topic of air quality for a long time really at this level. I think we need to bring it back. My question is the policy ready to tackle the needs and the problems in both urban areas and rural areas at this point? What else can we do to improve that? And how else? Because they usually are not really well heard because they are so scattered, and we deal with individual households. So we collect the data as our members go to every single literally person's door. So maybe an idea here how to integrate better with the companies and the businesses that are already present in those rural areas. And I also have a little bit of a question, that general question, maybe you can answer that. Recently I've been talking about the LIFE project, which also have the air quality aspects there, and a certain amount of money dedicated to project to improve air quality. They're a very great project actually in Poland, where LIFE project is bringing a lot of added value. But it seems that not all the money is used. So why there is such a problem with channeling those financing into the regions? Thank you.
Thank you very much. Last question.
Jakub Groszkowski, PG, thank you for this very interesting panel. I have a brief question regarding district heating. Taking the opportunity that we have panelists both from Finland and from Poland, do you have any good enough examples of decarbonization of district heating, either in Finland or elsewhere in the world? We of course know that electrification is a very good direction, but then we need to take into account also the end consumers that are not necessarily ready for lower temperature system. So if you have any solutions, any good examples, I'll be grateful. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Veli, would you like to take up the last question on district heating, or? I have to think about it. Okay. Okay, so who would like to, yes, Rina, which question you would like to?
A good enough example of district heating. I like the way you put good enough. Actually, it is an example from a place close to home, my husband's home, which is Falköping in Sweden. It's a small town of about 10,000 people, as many cows at some point as people, so rural perspective. And there you have a district heating, which is a very interesting example of biomass driven. There were issues at some point in terms of getting enough fuel that was needed. But they had cooperations with local areas that would allow them to do that. But it's a perfect example where the small enough community with leadership and trust and confidence in that area, that you're able to move many households to that. But it's also a nice example of the way that district heating could work in the town and in that environment. But for the other individuals who are closer to the cows and to the town centre, they obviously had to find alternative sources. So it was an example. It's a nice example of a mixed transition where, for the heating perspective, you had to use two different approaches to reach the rural communities versus those in the centre. Thanks.
Thank you.
If I may answer your question also, I think one is the data centers. If you think about them, they use lots and lots of energy, and they are trying to use clean energy, wind power mainly in Finland. They are planned to use wind power mainly, and the excess heat is put in the district heating. So that's the one thing I think, yeah.
But they do not exist, I think, yet. Or
yes, they're building one. I think there's 2 or 3 at the building construction already ongoing. So we have them approximately in a couple of years. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Thank you very much, Marcin.
So maybe about the district heating, as we have the largest one in the Europe in Warsaw. However, a state-owned company is responsible for the heat generation, and the private company is responsible for the pipes and for the network, which make things a bit complicated. However, I mean, that means we have to cooperate, and we have a couple of examples now, let's say pilots rather than, large-scale projects when the excess heat and waste heat is to be used in the network from the metro, subway, and from the sewage system. And that happens now. Veolia is cooperating with the municipal company to see how efficient is that, how if it could be leveraged, and so on and so forth. So that would be one. And the question about the villages and smaller cities. I think the recommendation number one would be to build a coalition to not solve the same issue one by one, but to get some joint projects, joint support, maybe joint local municipal police to be the one controlling the actors. But that would be a hectic job to cope that issues one by one as a single village. So maybe with support from regional office, marshal, I don't know, or voivodeship, and some institutional support from the cities like Warsaw could happen. And that's what we are trying to do in the marshal, in the Mazovia. We're trying to leverage our knowledge and our practice and our success, and together with Marshal Office, but also together with Smog Alert. So instead of fighting, we're cooperating now, because with the common goal, we created a platform when we can learn, let's say, not to patronize, but learn a bit smaller cities how we solve that, so they don't have to reinvent the wheel again, but use the best practices.
If I may add to this, because on rural areas, actually, it's very important point, because we speak now about Warsaw, and it's of course, a single case, quite unique. But together with Cleaner Fund, by the way, we developed LEADER program, which is actually focusing on, or not focusing, but we work with more than 40 cities in Poland, and we care very much that some of them, they are maybe it's not villages, but really small towns, which and everything depends on actually leadership, and there are some cities which are really great, so there is a city leader who just drives the change, motivates people to act, but also is applying for funds, because so this is very much dependent on the leadership, but also let's do not forget that those villages and cities, all of them, they are also different. So it's not that each rural area is the same one. There are cities like, in example, Piastów, which has some potential for geothermal, and suddenly some good change is happening. And but I agree with you that this is a rather big problem, because people in the rural areas in general, they have lower income, they have larger houses, and the options to deliver heat, but also to actually develop transport system is not so, is more expensive, and there are less options. So there are no district heating system in the rural areas. And by the way, in Polish district in Poland, the cheapest, most cost-efficient district heating system is Warsaw, where the citizens are the richest in Poland. So it's really phenomenon. Once you take a look on district heating system in smaller cities, which are inefficient, those district heating systems, they still are based on coal. Like 70% of district heating system in Poland, they are running with coal. They are fueled with coal. And for them, and they are already very expensive. So new investments like big change would probably mean actually like even higher costs. At least they wait for subsidies only. So the challenge is really for many cities that probably, I'm not sure if all the district heating systems will remain. I think some of them, they will just probably disappear in future, because the city leaders, but also companies, the capacity, intellectual capacity in those companies, but also the way how the market is currently regulated, which is very much focusing on not increasing the prices only. So it actually stops companies from modernization and let's say single action. So so that's really the challenge. But I don't know. We have 2 minutes to go.
If I may,
yes,
just
there
before.
was one question on defense, a very tricky
Yes.
one.
So before I go, I don't have much to say on the defense. I just wanted to share, we mentioned Poland, and one of the first projects where I was involved is about developing feeder systems in rural areas to connect with public transport interfaces. And we had a pilot in Krakow. And one of the ways to engage people, to convince them to change their habits, was to use the church during Mass to do this targeted approaches, because looking into the context is where actual people are together and they listen to their priest. So this is just a good example on use local capacity. To the LIFE program, as far as I'm aware, maybe the topic is not as sexy anymore. And I work on clean vehicles and air quality, so electromobility and air. Everything now is going electromobility, air quality is a bit outside of the radar. We see that also with the Horizon program. So that might be a reason. A second reason is that, and the last time I saw, for example, and tried to apply it, the funding rate is 50% sometimes. So for cities, it might not be, because they don't have the financial capacity to bring the rest. So this might be a reason, but it's a concerning reason, because these programs are competing with each other. So every unspent money is just a nail in the coffin. So I guess these two factors play a role on that. Regarding defense, the only connection that I think I can make is if we connect these defense investments with the trans-European network. So now Europe needs to develop this trans-European network, so connecting the main corridors, so the major urban nodes, the cities, through highways, trains, etc. This is useful, of course, for commuters, for transboundary goods transport, but could also be useful for evacuating people, for mobilizing troops. So I guess there is a synergy here. I would say first focus on the transport of people and goods, and then we can focus on the military, but why not use some of this spending to improve our trans-European network if there's not enough money. I know that now it's being discussed under the new MFF, and there's not a lot of money for transport. So I guess people have to be creative, and this is probably one of the options.
Thank you very much. And actually we just reached end of our panel, and now we have some coffee break. I think that what we have learned, that there are that things are happening. So that on each level there is no single answer, and but there are good enough examples which we can follow, and that's the positive thing. On defense, we can talk during a break. I see some link, but I don't want to develop this topic now. But let's just have a coffee break, and I hope we will meet after the coffee break, where we'll have fire chat with the head of National Fund for Environmental Protection and the representative of European Commission on how to link big ambitions with small actions on the ground.
But one more thing before a coffee break, a very important strategic one. We need a family photo with all of you. So please, can you stand like on the stage? Yes, perfectly. Again, after a coffee break, I can see that the caffeine made an effect and we are still ready for the next part of the discussion. And now we will have a fireside chat. And I am delighted to invite Dorota Zawadzka-Stępniak, President of National Fund for Environmental Protection. Milena Damianova, Policy Coordinator, Social Climate Fund, DG Klima. And Joanna Pandera, Founder and President of Forum Energii.
Thank you very much. It's me again. But I will do my best to keep the vivid discussion. So we will make use of this great opportunity that we have representative of the European Commission, and we have the representative of the National Fund for Environmental Protection, who basically is in charge for entire change in Poland. So it's I have to admit and tell you a small anecdote that I also have some experience in working for the government years ago, and always when there was no idea what to do with some funds or some policy, then everybody said always, let National Fund of Environmental Protection to do this. They are rich, they will tackle the problems. So this is how it ended up, that now National Fund for Environmental Protection is leading the biggest energy transition program for households in Europe and is facing big challenges. There was like the level of expectations on one hand is very high, but on the other hand, the weaknesses which are related and practical experiences which are really interesting are great, and we should learn from this. So maybe I ask my first question to Melina, because we know that DG Klima is working closely with member states in order to help them to prepare social climate plans. So could you say us where we are? And it's also relevant that we'll speak about EU context, not only, let's say, Polish context, because so where we are. There are 27 member states, all of them are different. Could you say us a bit what is the situation?
Thank you very much, first of all, for the honor of having our Deputy Director General inaugurating this very timely and interesting event, and also for us, sorry for Marcos Gonzalez could not make it today, but I'll try to answer your questions also with his guidance. And look, the Commission has started supporting the member states for the preparation of the social climate plans, not yesterday, but maybe at least 2 years ago or even earlier. We established an expert group with all member states, and we did that already in June 23. It's like few months. It was in May that the regulation on the social climate fund was like signed off by the Parliament and Council. And in June, 2 months later, we invited the member states to talk about how to do the social climate plans. And why did we did that? It was maybe too early for some, because they still had having in mind what DG Klima had prepared, and the legislation was adopted, cars and vans, the extension of the current ETS to maritime, the extension, well, the more robust system for the aviation, and it had to be done in 24, and this was, and the social climate plans are due only in June 25. So in 23 you will say, oh, you have a lot.
In 1 month's time.
Exactly, you have 2 years, but now it's 1 month time. And also the Commission had to prepare the member states for those who wanted to provide the technical support instrument to support the member states. And happily we have, out of 27, 10 member states applied and get this support. It's very detailed. It's really, I've seen one of the deliverables now, it's around 150 pages with measures, investments, analysis. Before that, there was another 100 pages of analysis what the impacts of ETS2 are. And it is for the benefit not only of those who applied and actively have this support, but the methodological guidance is shared with all member states. And we do this within this Social Climate Fund expert group. We have also prepared and published 2 very important guidances, which one of them the Commission was supposed to do. The other one is kind of a gift from the Commission, how to do the plans, and the other one that was very necessary. I did not hear this early afternoon, but it's on do not significant harm. It's a very important element that with one instrument you should not harm the other, like the nature, the biodiversity, the climate mitigation or the adaptation efforts. So we did that, and from the beginning of this year, we started a very thorough discussion with all member states. And of course, this is, as I heard, the green or clean transition is a multidisciplinary, let's say, element. And here I heard a lot, because also we need really, and one of the main aspects of the Social Climate Fund is that no one is left behind. The multidisciplinary approach among the member states, almost all of them have established inter-service or inter-institutional or inter-ministerial working groups where Ministry of Environment or Energy or Economics or work together with Ministry of European funds, with Ministry of Social Affairs, because this fund is not one single element to cover. There are many elements, so it's multidisciplinary. And we do this approach, we replicate in the Commission. Since September last year, when the new Commission President presented her mandate, there are 2 Commission services, DG Klima and DG Employment. Klima stayed always from the negotiations, and my colleague and me, we were there from the conceiving of the plan. But we have DG Employment. So on one side, Klima is the Klima element, the climate, and social is DG Employment. And so we work hand with them. They have huge capacity and we are a bit less. But we are now working with the member states on identifying the best ways to prepare their plans, and we work on the good measures and investments. And I have to tell you that Marcos and many colleagues, like Marcos has maybe, I don't know, two meetings per member state per day, not per week. So I mean, it's very, very intensive. It's with, of course, different intensity from different member states. For Poland, I can say that we now, since the summer or late spring last year, we see very committed partner in the face of the Ministry of European Funds. I don't know whether I pronounced correctly the name, but they are really, we had time in the summer last year, we had meetings every week. It's a very intensive process. We are really insisting that the plan should be submitted on time so that the member states should have enough time to implement those plans. Normally should start from next year implementing, and also the Commission to pay. And one last very important thing, the Social Climate Fund comes to help the most vulnerable in coping with the new emission trading system for road transport and buildings. And these 2 instruments of the EU policy are intrinsically linked, and one would not survive with the other, even in the implementation phase. So this means that, of course, the member states should implement fully the emission trading system if they expect to get any money from the Social Climate Fund, because the fund is supposed to alleviate this burden. So far here, and then we continue. Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much. So, Mrs. President, so my question is to you. What are your practical experiences with implementation of this clean air program, which is supposed to actually take the funds from social climate funds. So it will be like a tool or to implement social climate fund.
Yes, for sure. You know, just to refer to what you said, exactly. I mean, in the climate social climate plan, our program is also involved. I mean, clean air program with the budget of 10 billion of Polish zlotys, so approximately 2.3 billion of euro. And of course, we will be involved in the implementation of the plan itself. But before this, I mean, we have already set up a program already in September 2018. The program with the total budget at that time assumed for the level of more than 100 of billion of Polish zlotys, so really a huge budget. And this program, Cleaner program, is mainly dedicated to single family houses for owners or co-owners of these houses, and with the main focus of most vulnerable with low income households and beneficiaries. And the program is mainly dedicated to the change of the heat source with the thermal renovation, thermal retrofitting. And also we finance all the preparation of the documents like energy audits and also certification, energy performance certification afterwards, after the project. And all this program already, okay, maybe it's worth mentioning that the level of financing, the level of subsidy, because we are distributing this program in a form of grants, but the level of subsidy depends on the level of income. So this progressive financing is something which I think is crucial for a correct, how to say, correct dedication to a concrete group of people. I will say a few words in a minute about lessons learned from the implementation of the program, but this progressive financing is of a key importance. And what is also worth mentioning that from the beginning of the implementation of this program, over 1 million of application was submitted. Approximately 500,000 of fossil fuel boilers were changed, mainly into the renewables like heat pumps or biomass boilers, or because we can also finance this, all the connection to the district heating systems. And approximately 200,000 of Polish single houses were renovated. Most of them were into the deep renovation, so we finance all the changes in terms of windows, in terms of insulation, in terms of change of doors, and so on and so on. So due to these projects, approximately 1 million of coal were saved, I would say, so were not used for the heating of these houses, and still a lot to be done, because more than 2 million of coilers are still remaining to be replaced. But I mean, the program itself was, I would say, a success, but unfortunately, and I have to say it at the beginning, we're also not constructed in a proper way. I mean, we wanted to have focus on really most vulnerable beneficiaries, but unfortunately, the changes in the program were or led to such situation that a lot of people, these low incomes people, were, how to say, were cheated, or were were frauded, exactly, or a lot of abuses, a lot of frauds were implemented, unfortunately, in this program. So for me, lessons learned and the challenge is, of course, and we have already done this from the end of March, is to construct this program in such a way to go into exactly the right group of people, these people who are under the energy poverty, and also to give them concrete support, not only financial support, because I fully agree that it's not only about financing, it's also about advising people. It's about building a scheme to go with good knowledge, with competences to a concrete group of people. And it's also, and I think it's needed to have also the good cooperation with different stakeholders, also on a municipal level. But I understand that we will go into details about challenges and lessons learned from the program itself.
Yes, I have a question actually, because we talk a lot about most vulnerable households, and in fact, entire discussion focuses on those, let's call it energy poor people, but on the other hand, it's about 15% of the society, and 85 is still under pressure too, and it's this program is on one hand really devoted to the most vulnerable, when we know that it's the maybe most difficult part, and each household can get actually 30,000 euro, which is a lot, but on the other hand the rest needs to actually do everything by themselves, and still it's not that there are maybe some incentives, but not too much. So maybe my question to Melina, so do you see also what is the plan of the Commission also to encourage others to act and to help them? Because it's not that only the 15% of the society is the problem, and many people, and also we've been talking about this, that it's not only about funds, but it's also about motivation to act and feeling actually really the goal. So do you see that challenge, or is it up to member states to act?
If you talk about concretely the Social Climate Fund, its target is clear. Its funds can be used only for the most vulnerable. But if we talk to the wider picture and the wider green transition, and how there we, and this is what our Deputy Director General mentioned, the European Green Deal and the legislation that was proposed by the Commission and subsequently adopted in 21, 22, 23, it spelled out a mixture, a big picture of at least 15 different instruments, some of them being carrots, like the Social Climate Fund, but some of them being sticks, or kind of very restrictive measures on the cars and vans CO2 standards. You have also requirements by the Energy Performance of Building Directive. And of course, the Commission is always requiring or going with what I think last panel, the previous panel, Pedro, you mentioned about the need for structural approach or plan-based. So the Social Climate Fund is based on a plan. The general policy framework in each member state should be put in the integrated national energy and climate plans, and for the EPBD, for the Energy Performance of Buildings Directive, they also you have plans. And there, okay, the different instruments play their different role. Of course, local initiatives like banning in the center of Brussels the Euro 5 diesel cars, this was an incentive for some which still had the resources to go to electric vehicles. And you see now, really in the heart of Europe, you see the new cars are much more, the electric new cars are much more than the others. But so, and you heard how much the emission trading system has generated in terms of revenues. So on one side, we incentivize with the introduction of emission trading, we make certain elements more expensive, and then not only the most vulnerable, but those that are in the middle or higher level income can start moving towards their like their personal decarbonization. But you also have the other instruments that can help, be it with with the money of, but concretely for the Social Climate Fund, it was clarified, maybe it's different, maybe there is some criticism that for the Social Climate Fund, the EU or the emission trading system gives 75% of the fund, of the plan spendings, and member states, but with their own national money, should give the other 25%. In the cohesion funds, this national co-financing is understood that it can be from private financing. For these purposes here, it is very important that it is the, but also another element, and there maybe your lessons learned from, like how to fight against fraud or corruption, or I don't know, fraud, let's say, in implementing such measures. It is clear that giving just money to a poor household who doesn't have the information, who doesn't have the knowledge to even go to the best, I don't know, or to find the contractor, the state can do that, or the municipalities can do that, or even NGOs can do that. And I have an experience, like Habitat for Humanity are doing this apparently in several member states. And there is a provision in the Social Climate Fund regulation. If these kind of entities receive the money, the member state should ensure and should have a mechanism established so that all the benefit of this program, of this money, goes to the most vulnerable. So in a way, the skilled businesses can do the job, or skilled NGOs or civil society organizations, with one-stop shop with providing information, including municipalities. And from the experience, what I saw, I've seen some drafts measures in investments. I see that there are many where the municipalities are invited.
And I have to refer to what you said. I fully agree what was said, and exactly it was our way of thinking. We, in a new version of the document of the program, we decided to implement the role of operator, especially for this group of people who needs help, who needs knowledge, who needs leading for the whole process of the project implementation. And for the time being, the role of operators play municipalities who are close to beneficiaries, who are, you know, they have public trust. So really operators, and in my opinion, they are playing a very, very important role in the implementation of the project, especially for this group of most vulnerable. But also referring what you said about financing, I mean, we have already in this program, we have the access to the Recovery and Resilience Facility. We have we finance this project also from the cohesion policy, also from the modernization fund. But what is, I think, needed for the future, especially that the level of ambition is so high and the investment needs are really high, and frankly speaking, we need new sources of financing, or we need at least coordination of the sources of financing which will be available for the next years, because I think it's with the total investments of more than 2 million of households in terms of Polish level, we need this how to say coordination, and we need coordination also between sources of financing. First of all, to have efficiency, but also secondly, to have the goal achieved in the end.
You mentioned, Dorota, actually a very important point about this need of neutral advice, which is because actually what is the main problem is that there is a pressure on households to act on, and then there are companies. So there are no neutral advisors who can really serve as in benefit of the households and not of the technologies or products which companies are selling. And I have, so on one hand, this, let's say, bridge solution is naming those operators within this Clean Air program, which serve a bit basically institutions which will frame energy efficiency as a really big topic in this, because for years we did not develop good practices related with energy transition, with energy efficiency in buildings particularly, because there is no actually like group of interest behind. So finally, it's only in the interest of people to invest in energy efficiency. There are no renewables technologies behind, like big companies behind who can push government to act. So I'm just wondering if you can comment on it, because I think that entire governance structure should be really changed, and this is something what European Commission should also see and force member states. Otherwise, there will be really lots of funds which will be wasted and the goals will not be achieved.
That's why I said previously about coordination, but I was saying also about coordination, not only financial sources, but also about coordination between ministries, between institutions, because for the time being, it's like that one ministry is responsible for the EPBD directive implementation, and other ministry is responsible for example, for the climate and energy action plan, for energy policy, energy strategy, and some other for the distribution of the European funds. So for me, it's clear that it should be somehow coordinated, and of course we are trying to do it. But I would say it should be somehow it should be done in a more concrete and more coordinated way. And secondly, I really think that we can call it eco-advisors, we can call it energy advisors, whatever. I mean, it is really needed to have people who have knowledge and who can send this knowledge to, especially to those people who, for this most vulnerable, for low-income low-income households, because they have problems to even to know that such a program or such a support scheme exists, really. And for Polish people here, maybe it's not unbelievable that there are some people in Poland who has never heard about cleaner program in Poland. But I can guarantee you that there are many people who haven't heard about this. But based on that, these eco-advisors can play on one role of technical support, but they can also play a role of the ambassadors of the energy transition at the local level. Because they can, for example, they can of course teach, but they can also support in the implementation of certain projects. And frankly speaking, for us, these municipalities now, we have less than 50% of municipalities who submitted the documents for the cooperation with us. I really hope that it will be more, but nevertheless, they can really play a very important role in the whole transition at the local level, not only about the implementation of the program itself, because you know the program has a concrete budget, concrete goals, but the needs for the implementation will exist. And really we want to use this, sorry, maybe not the proper word, but we really want to have them for the time being, not only of the existing of the program. And I have to say, because some of you knows that I also work for Warsaw, and we and Marcin, in the past, of course, in the past, and Marcin haven't mentioned that, but it's I think very also important. We also constructed in Warsaw a project for advisors, for energy advisors, and these people were close to people, were close to citizens. They really support not only in terms of our grant program, which was implemented by the city, but they also play a very important role in terms of public awareness or increase awareness of people, and also be closest with the information to those who really need this information in a proper way.
I'm just thinking if there are any questions. There is, okay, because I also have many questions, but okay, please go ahead. Are there other questions maybe? No? Okay, so the one. So then I can come up with my question too.
Yeah, it's working. Thank you for this very interesting exchange. I totally agree with you, and you mentioned this capacity to reach the local communities. I think this is more or less what we also mentioned when we talk about the one-stop shop approach. either for energy or for transport. One thing that I want to ask to both of you, because both of you highlighted the fact that we need more capacitation, we need more champions to support, but there's already one initiative, which is the European Energy Poverty Advisory Hub. So this could be the forum. Of course, it's DG Ener, so it's not DG Klima, but there's already structures in place, so why not use what's already there and capitalize on the knowledge that's been created? Are you considering it? Is this the tool? Because I haven't heard about it today, and I was surprised.
If I may add my last question also, because I don't think we'll have more time, but my question is a bit different to you, Dorota, actually, because Clean Air program started as a clean air. So it was developed by our previous conservative government. It was this ambition of having health environment. So it's a really important driver now in the context of right-wing populism, which is emerging, that still actually among different topics, maybe climate becomes more controversial, but on the other, the need for clean environment and health is still predominant for everybody. So I'm just wondering if you could comment a bit, because now it's clean air is much more than clean air only. So how it changed? Also, what was the motivation? And this is also interesting. So, but now those two questions, and we just finish.
Okay.
Very quickly,
the first
2 minutes.
Yeah. Basically, we do work with the DGNR, and there is very big. As I said, we have a multidisciplinary approach in the Commission, and actually this energy poverty advisory hub and also the energy poverty way of understanding has been presented to the member states in this forum, as I mentioned to you, the Social Climate Fund Expert Group. And actually this advisory hub is in a way one of the possible answers to other member states who have, and this was mentioned, the biggest challenge for the social climate funds is the targeting. This is not a fund where you have certain amount of resources and whoever is best goes, applies, and that's it, the money is spent. The member states should do the job, and that's why we require these social climate plans. And even it is different from the recovery resilience facility, where it says in order to get money from the RRF you need to present a plan. Now there is an obligation, whatever you do, you need to do a social climate plan, because there you will plan what exactly and how you will take all these people in energy poverty, transport poverty out of it. And this is there are many member states who say we don't have, even big old member states who don't have the data on vulnerability on energy poverty, and this is one of the ways the GNR has worked. But unfortunately these hubs, they don't exist in all member states, so it's possible that with other funds these energy poverty advisory hubs are established, and then further, of course, based on that, because without the Commission needs to approve within 5 months the social climate plans that when they are submitted. But if we do not see a good justification and analysis of what the effects of ETS2 are on the most vulnerable, we will not be able to approve it. So this element of first of all, identifying what is the relevance and the magnitude that the ETS2 brings to the citizens and most vulnerable, and then what are those who should profit from this fund, because there are different ways and the definitions are there, but the member states are free to kind of adjust and to identify. So this is there.
So very shortly, in terms of your question, we of course are fully aware of this advisory hub, and we try to somehow build our system based on that, but also taking into account exactly what you said, that these hubs are not operational at the level in Poland. So we are trying to to build our own program, of course in cooperation with regions, because we have at least 3 regions who constructed similar programs, similar systems in regions, in voivodeships, so just to have a coherency between them. And answering to the last question, because I see that the time coming, yes, once the program was constructed, of course the air quality goals, mainly the change in terms of heating sources were as a goal. We decided already last year, and we put a lot of emphasis on the energy efficiency. We have put energy standards already in the program. And why we did that? First of all, we see that this program has a huge power in terms of energy transition, and we don't want to have a situation like was in the past, that to the house which was not insulated, a certain heat pump, for example, heat pump were installed, and of course the demand for the source were huge. So we decided really to link the climate policy targets, mainly energy efficiency, and as I mentioned, we put it already in the new version of documents. So in the most vulnerable most vulnerable households, we decided apart to the income level as a criteria, we decided to put also energy standard criteria as obligatory, and as I mentioned, we decided to link this to policies.
Thank you very much. And there was also one big change which was implemented recently, because the Clean Air program actually supported heavily gas boilers. So the use of gas in households increased from 4 billion cubic meters to almost 6 billion cubic meters within few years. It was only the result of the Clean Air program. So it was, of course, contradictory to the climate targets, but in line with clean air policy. So this was something what was changed now, that gas boilers will not get subsidies anymore from the Clean Air program.
Exactly.
But we just unfortunately need to conclude this interesting session. But I have few comments that on one hand, funds are certainly not everything, what Rina said in the previous session, but without funds, it will be really hard to encourage people to act once they need to bear costs. So this was a bit the questions which we have, how it links with defense. In my view, it's rather contradictory, but of course it's huge dilemma, because if we will not invest in lowering also our dependence on fossil fuels, it is another dimension of energy security which we need to let's say think. But also what is very relevant is that one single tool, even really best, developed by a motivated institution, is not enough. We need to have entire governance infrastructure. We need to have energy efficiency advisors. We need to have people who care and monitor energy poverty, and those who care for monitoring of the air quality, and basically all the changes which are happening fast, because the goals are very ambitious. So we should achieve targets until 2030 within 5 years. So if the change will be uncoordinated, we may end up with something which will create either backlash or will not lead us to the purpose which we would like to achieve. So this is something what we need to take into account. Dorota, last
so just one last sentence. I would also emphasize on 3 things: accessibility to the program, to the programs, trust in public programs and in government, and also stability in terms of financial programs of this type.
So we have the solutions. Now just we need to implement this. So thank you very much, and
thank you.
See you in the next panel.
Yes, and the picture, please. One more important thing before we pass to another panel. So we are talking about citizens, about the air quality program, and now it's time to talk about regions. So I invite Magdalena Hawuła from Forum Energii, the program director for cities, region, people, cities, and region. And Magda will present all the panelists.
Thank you very much, Maria. Welcome, everyone. And I'm so happy to see all of you still being here when the weather is so nice. So I would like to invite Paweł Olechnowicz, Policy Officer from the DG Regional and Urban Policy Unit for Smart and Sustainable Growth from the European Commission. And Ania Schneider from Environmental Team of Bloomberg Philanthropies. Alexandru Kelemen, Director for GU Valley Integrated Territorial Development Association. And Corina Zierold, Head of Just Transition Industrial Europe. Okay. Well, that was all interesting debates before, and you probably wonder, some of you, how it connects to the Just Transition. But I do think that there are plenty of synergies, especially that coal regions are kind of vulnerable as well. And I wanted to pick up on the things that Dorota mentioned: accessibility, trust, and stability in funding. And I think that will be also picked up on during this panel in view of the Just Transition Fund and its future. But let's start moving. Coal regions are definitely sensitive at the moment because they are kind of in a structured way, depending on the outcomes of Just Transition. And energy transition is happening, and they are just, being somehow in the middle of this. And for now, maybe not all of them are like considered as poor regions, but if not handled properly, they might become poor very quickly. So this is why we need to discuss how to work around it so they don't. So Paweł, there is a range of regulations, initiatives, and funding instruments that support regions. And how is the European Commission working to better integrate those efforts on the EU level, and especially in the view of strengthening the social acceptance for energy transition?
As you rightly said, thank you very much, first of all, for inviting me. As you rightly said, in fact, there are social aspects of the energy transition. It means that we have to be sure that no one is left behind by this transition toward climate neutral economy. In fact, we, as you rightly also mentioned, and my predecessor said, the right coordination between the funding is crucial in order to avoid the cannibalization of different funding, but rather coordination between funds. But for example, National Fund for Environment and Social and Protection is the right, let's say, implementing body to coordinate this all funding. And the Commission, especially in cohesion policy, encourage the partnership. It means that the energy transition should be designed, implemented with the people which are the mostly affected from the ground, from the most affected regions. It means they design territorial just transition plans. They also are involved in implementation Just Transition Fund, which has 20 billion euros for around 100 territories. And it should be designed, the better way is the bottom up. It means that the people who know their needs, challenges should be involved, like trade unions. We closely cooperate with industrial, with the local trade unions, with the people, because the coal miners, especially in coal regions, will be the most affected by the change of technology when you produce the energy. So we encourage, and in fact, partnership, it's in the DNA of the cohesion policy. It means that you should design policy with people, not without people. Yeah.
Thank you so much. And now I want to ask Anya, how can regions in transition better attract investments? Like, what kind of support do you think they need to help develop effective diversification strategies? Because some of them will stay energy regions, but probably with different sources, but some of them will diversify to other things. What to do to promote cross-regional cooperation?
Thank you, Magdalena. And just to take a step back, because probably people won't understand why someone from Bloomberg Philanthropies is on the panel. And for those who are not familiar with Bloomberg Philanthropy, so we encompass all of Michael Bloomberg's foundation and corporate and philanthropy giving, and we work with partners. Well, there's several programs, including environment program, and as part of that environment program, we support partners, but also work with cities and mayors to advance the transition, and that includes some work as well in coal-dependent countries. So I think from my end, and where I think it's important for us to think about how regions can attract investment, especially now that everyone is speaking about the Clean Industrial Deal, the competitiveness agenda, but how will regions be the hubs of that growth, and how can transition mean to create new opportunities and new economic opportunities for that, for Europe, for the green, and for investment and for the growth. I think how I see it is, and how we see it at Bloomberg Philanthropies, is that it is essential for cities and regions to continue to be empowered, and that includes access to funding, but also for them to be able to take decisions, and this multi-level governance. So the relationship that they have with EU decision makers, but also national decision makers, for them to be part of the decision making and to be around the table will be important. And that leads me to what exactly regions need to attract investment. At Bloomberg Philanthropies, we worked with a lot of partners that were involved in the Just Transition Fund planning since its inception, and then now through the allocation. And I think the first step is, if a region doesn't have a clear plan and something that can be evidenced and that is data backed, then it's a very, very bad start. So that starts with that. And if there's opportunity to have investment plan, that's also very important. We speak about EU funds. We know these are very powerful tools, right? There's the Just Transition Fund, but not only, the cohesion funds, etc. And we're now discussing the next MFF. But how can this fund be used strategically to unlock, of course, more public funding, but also eventually attract private investment? We also think about how can we have regions that are able to create a pipeline of investment and bankable projects. How do we give these regions the technical assistance or the capacity for them to be able to build this project or to attract these projects? And of course, we also think about what kind of financial products we can offer them to be able to advance this kind of projects. So I guess I'll end this in a few kind of key messages. I spoke about policy coherence, so the fact that we're now speaking about the Clean Industrial Deal, competitiveness, etc., and different funds. How can we make sure that there's a coherence and that regions are able to attract and to create these enabling environments to attract investments? How do we give them the technical assistance and the support that they need to do that? Then there's the data and analysis that they need. So any tools to, for example, assess labor market impacts or others, and philanthropy can also play a role in that. We've supported partners to undertake that analysis that can inform some of the decisions that regions can take. Of course, we mentioned before public engagement and buy-in. For regions to be able to attract investment, it also needs to be coherent with what the public and the community wants. So making sure there's buy-in and there's consultations in that process. And of course, financial support. You know, as I mentioned, there's just transition funds, there's the InvestEU guarantees and others. But we need to be much more smarter in the way that we're going to be attracting private investment in those regions that need it the most. Thank you.
Yeah, here I want to also mention that investment in renewables should not be treated as investment just for the sake of renewables, but also as an enabler to attract other investments, which, you know, everybody wants now, green energy. Alexandru, I have a question for you about the Jiu Valley. What the Just Transition Fund or Just Transition process meant for Jiu Valley, and what mechanism have been the key to empower the region, and you know, you're trying to empower the future growth. So of course there's the fund, the planning, what else? And or maybe you can elaborate on those two.
Yes, so sorry for my phone. First of all, thank you very much for having me today here in Brussels. I already have a lot of homework for when I go from the previous panels, and a lot of actual questions for myself to answer, because before starting about talking about Jiu Valley, I was wondering actually what would happen if we have no subsidies in Europe, and are the priorities actually of the municipalities and the same? Because I see a lot of discussion about prioritization of funds, but actually if there are subsidies, and some of the priorities that we make is because there are subsidies, not because it's embedded in our local culture. So just as maybe a thought for people, that when you cut funds, then maybe there are other priorities, and this is an answer that we need to take into consideration. And I'm very happy that Bloomberg Philanthropies is here, because I was discussing with the Just Transition Fund in the United States actually, and they have a lot of capital risk for different kind of measures for reshaping or rethinking the communities. But coming back to Jiu Valley, and I was noting very well what do we have to do in order to be competitive, economically competitive, because we started, of course, the process of transition economically also. I'm a social worker as a profession, so I work 15 years in vulnerable communities. So I'm pretty much linked to the vulnerable consumer, to the energy poverty, but in the sense, also I'm very adamant that we have to create a new economy, local economy, which actually has a principle of give back, first of all. So we need as much as possible local entrepreneurs which are connected already to the area, but in the same time to meet the plan, the investment plans, and the pipeline of investments, and the financial, to be very open to different kind of financial instruments in order to do this. And it's a process of not 3 years, not 7 years, because when you've done the same activity and actually everything is connected to, I don't know, mining, for example, for 100 years, it's quite unreasonable to think that in 3 years or in 7 years, everybody will switch to, I don't know, nautics or something like this, even though a big company will come in the area, which is also not a good idea, because you are switching to mono-industrialism with another mono-industrialism. So in our region, I would say we started, it was a painful process, I will not lie, because people change and they have this anxiety for the new, and this is normal. Even ourselves, when we start something new, we have a certain degree of anxiety, and communities are living organisms which develop human emotions. Anxiety is normal, and it needs mentoring, and also it needs, of course, a lot of people which not only provide financial help, like in the first panel was, or the second panel was said, but also it needs guidance. It needs some people which are close to the people, which are the former miners, or maybe the people which are suffering from poverty, to explain, but also not only to explain what's available, because if they don't have the resources, what you have in mind is a lot of frustration. we have a lot of money in Jiu Valley, but actually nothing is available. The people see that there is a lot of money on just transition, but if they don't reach them, you actually create a different problem, which is frustration. And most of the times we have elections next week, so we will see what this happens. So if you don't action, if you don't do investments, then you will have consequences. So we need to make it a little bit more close to the community. And for me, the success, I don't know, at least our approach, because I'm the director of this entity which should be close to the people, so I don't want to praise myself or my team, it's not myself, but I think it's very important to move the decision as close to as you can to the person. If it's an individual consumer or a vulnerable consumer, put the decision on the hands of the social worker, actually, not on the mayor. As close as you can get to the people, that's the one who should take, or at least you should take into consideration the decision, in the decision-making process, the person or the entity which is closest to the one that you are referring to. Otherwise, it makes no sense from my point of view. And of course, you have a lot of macro data, but use the local people to do it. We have a governance which is a partnership between public entities, university, because you need a lot of data in order to adequate your public policy. Otherwise, you're just pushing in the dark some different kind of investments. University, NGOs, of course, who also have a very important role in the society. So we've designed this governance. I'm coming from NGO sector. So I was mandated by the public administration also to lead a group of people which are trying as much as possible to challenge or to tackle, let's say, the challenges, not of the funds or the agendas, the European agendas, but the challenges of the community in Jiu Valley.
Okay, thank you very much. And that would align with my view that behavioral science should be included in policy design regarding the energy transition. Corina, you represent workers and some of the workers in transition. Their interests are sometimes contradicting to the policies that are designed. So how do you see that problem? And from the employer point of, what do you expect from the government, from the employers and the EU to secure the kind of structural changes?
Mm-hmm. I'd like to pick up actually where I think Alexandru also actually referred to is that workers expect some perspective, some certainty. I think it's very important if you want to provide this certainty, perspective, that you do not design only policies for workers, but you design policy with workers. So for us, it's beyond support of workers. It must be about, co-governance. It must be about involving the workers in the plans. As such, we know that the Just Transition Fund specifically and the territorial Just Transition plans, we have a strong element of co-governance in there. But from a union perspective, and we surveyed our unions, not only the sectoral unions that Industry or Europe represents, but also with the ETUC, we surveyed the confederations. We know in some regions the involvement of trade unions has been working well, and in some others, trade unions were not even aware that there was a Just Transition Fund. So, and that is a problem for us, because of course in the region, especially coal regions that have to phase out coal, and then will also phase out jobs in a specific sector, you have to, our demand is please anticipate and manage the change together with us. We need time, we need resources, but we also need really involvement in the discussion to be taken serious. And one of the main demands is that for the jobs that disappear, that there will be other jobs that will be created. And that these other jobs are not just any jobs, but that they are of a certain quality, of equal quality to the jobs that are lost. I think it's very important that you give this perspective to the workers, to the trade unions, that the jobs that are being created are also governed by collective bargaining, which is one of the main tools we have as trade unions to negotiate not only wages but also provisions on health and safety and training and skills, which is very important. So first demand is provide trade unions with a proactive role. We know I think in some of the Polish regions it works rather well. The unions are involved. There's a social contract which is very much in limbo, I understand, because of the developments. But I think it's very important that there's a contract with unions, and that there's commitments to the creation of jobs, but also the social dialogue side. Maybe I leave it here for the first, and then we can discuss a bit further in the comment.
Sure. The role of social dialogue is very important indeed, but I'm also a supporter of creating more and more SMEs in those regions that undergo transition, just to make the economy more diversified. Paweł, Poland. Energy transition debate probably wouldn't go so active if there wasn't a introduction of Just Transition Fund. That kind of pushed both the companies, the regions, the policymakers to kind of decide on things, to start working on the schedule. Many regions benefited significantly from this instrument and now are concerned about the future of that fund. Can you tell us what are the initial plans of the Commission to support the coal regions in post 2027?
Thank you very much for this question. In fact, not only in Poland, Just Transition Fund triggered the discussion about energy transition, but also in other Central European regions. For example, coal phase-out was not planned in several member states, or it was delayed, but it happened. So it was incentive, in fact, to start discussion about energy transition. As regard future, we are on the stage of reflection. So we are about next month we will publish the midterm evaluation of all cohesion policy funds managed by co-managed by DG Regio. So one of the elements of this analysis would be also Just Transition Fund. We are engaged with stakeholders in discussion. We set up the working group on the future of Just Transition Fund. So Karina is very aware about this. So we are listening to the stakeholders, we are collecting the views from the ground, from the national authorities, from the regional authorities, and in July we'll publish the first, let's say, draft of the multi-annual financial framework. And then we'll start also discussion about particular setup of funding, but it's not prejudged, it will be standalone or the merge with the other fundings. Anyway, what is clear that our president announced that in the next MFF there will be substantial increase of the funding for Just Transition.
Well, that's a good news to hear. I just hope that it will be still the centralized way and the place-based policy driven, because that I think worked pretty well in recent years. Anya, in 2022, Bloomberg Philanthropies and Forum Energii actually published a report on post-lignite future for Bełchatów. If someone doesn't know, Bełchatów is this one little place that actually is the biggest point of emissions in Europe. Could you elaborate on how data-driven approaches can help regions better strategic investments and engage citizens in the transition process?
Thank you. And to add to your description of Bełchatów, it's you said it's large source of emission, but also quite a central point for the energy system in Poland. Provides, I think, about 1/5 of all power in Poland. So this, just to give a bit of background for this report. So it came about as there were discussions around just transition funding, and Pavel probably knows the story more in terms of the timeline, but it came as partners and Forum Energii were discussing how to ensure that the region where Bełchatów is stands would have access to Just Transition Fund and would have a plan that would be evidence-based and quite reliable and credible. So this report outlined how the generation capacity of the plant would be replaced in the region and what kind of opportunities for the region to continue to be, let's say, an energy hub or a clean energy hub, I would say. And so together with the team at Bloomberg NEF, Forum Energii worked together on this report, which came out. And I hope I'm not overstepping to say that I hope it helped inform some of the discussions that allowed for the region to then benefit from and be a recipient of Just Transition funding. So it was great news. And I think that answers part of your question, why we think data is very important, both in terms of having a plan for the region, but also to give investors and the private sector some kind of trust and confidence that the region can actually deliver and be home for these investments. Another thing, I think data can be let's say a tool of empowerment for these regions, right? I don't want to quote Michael Bloomberg when he always says, if you cannot measure it, you cannot manage it. So it's a bit like this. It's like business, right? You need to have the data to be able to make the case for investment. And probably it also applies to other coal regions, right? If we give the regions the capacity to have access to that data, and it can be both from technical assistance that is delivered from the Just Transition Fund. There's teams working very closely with some of the regions to give them plans and analysis and capacity building. And I believe Forum is also working with the region at the moment as a kind of follow-up to this report, right? To get the region the technical assistance it needs to design those acceleration areas. So it is a long process, but making sure that we know what support that regions need to advance that process, yeah, it's very important.
Well, I would say the more data is in the region, the better transition plans they prepare. Okay, let's go back to Alexandru and ensuring the strong social dimension in the energy transition is often easier said than done, obviously. What steps have you taken to communicate the benefits of the transition? Because I personally think it has to be strengthened, this part of communicating benefits. So what steps have you taken to communicate those benefits of the transition and involve the community to address, their concerns and also build lasting public trust?
Well, it's an ongoing process, I would say, and I don't think it will end because, as I mentioned, at the moment, we are in full process and we actually have really started deploying money on the ground not far along. And actually the best solution to convince people that there is something good happening is actually seeing some projects on the ground, not programming and strategizing, which actually sometimes, if it's too long, it creates more frustration actually than nothing is happening. So in our case, of course, it was very, we were also, because we are a heavy centralized state, we depended on the deployment of the fund from the national level to the regional level to the micro-regional level. So it were in my opinion, too many levels, but either way, it's just a personal opinion. It becomes a lot of very bureaucratic. But we just started actually deploying, as I mentioned, money for the SMEs, money for the social economy, money for different kind of stuff, and we soon realized that it's not just enough to, let's say, have in the local media campaign or something, or different kind of I don't know, public informing, because people don't really they associate actually these subsidies to some people, sometimes with corruption, sometimes that it's only like something very niche and only some people. They don't have consultants which can help them actually write the project. So I think the key is the governance, and how the governance in a small community can, and the people in the government, not the governance itself, but the people, how you can design it actually, and to do sometimes door-to-door discussions. In my case, for example, we in the SMEs, we just literally went. I took the list of all SMEs, and I went to their door and I said, look, something's happening in the community, some things will happen before, when in the programming time, and look, we need you, are you interested, let's see how you can grow, let's see, for example, do you want to switch to something else, do you want to improve, do you want to scale, do you want to, I don't know, develop new industries. So I think it's a lot of work, first of all to inform, then to help, and afterwards to promise or to say, let's okay, this is a success story or not. Sometimes you just need to reopen some of the calls, because you need a little bit more leg work in the communities, and I think this is something that needs to be done. We try as much as possible to be all over, but especially in the local media, and we try to find some local, let's say, people which have no contact. I'm a social worker. I didn't even care about energy transition. I was working for Caritas in social sciences. In 3 years, I'm discussing about energy communities. I don't know why, but either way, people, local people which have trust in the community for their work, not because they promised a lot and did not deliver, are key persons which can actually motivate other stakeholders, even if it's from civil society, businesses, public entities. We had sometimes public entities which are part of the system which were not interested actually in some of the calls, because they didn't really thought it's viable, or they couldn't find solutions for co-financing, for example, or something like this. So you need a lot of legwork. I think you need a lot of people which have a degree of trust in the community, and actually which are vectors of seriousness from my point of view, and results. And yeah, it's a teamwork also, and also you have to be open to different kind of we have different kind of solicitations from in our help desk from different kind of people who just want to do something, and let's see how we can direct it. Maybe it's not about the Just Transition Fund, because the Just Transition Fund but it's, you have to understand transition as a community reshift. It's not only about, so you need this governance of the Just Transition Fund. If it's funded through the Just Transition Fund, be it. But you have to have some local people which actually can direct them, maybe from the Cohesion Fund, maybe from, I don't know, RFF or something like this. There are a lot of ways, and you need a contact point which is close to the community, the citizen, because, for example, I was just in the local media and said, look, everybody needs to have a association in the building. The next day we had, like, they came to me even though I told them to go to the mayorship, not to me. But next day I had 10 people waiting. They said, look, what do we have to do? So people are reactive if you go to them, but you need to also follow on the process. If you don't do it and you say, okay, you go to the municipality, that's not the solution. You say, look, let's work with you a little bit. Let's see how we can help you, and people will do it. Maybe it's a small community in Jiu Valley. We have 100,000 inhabitants, but still it's not, it's 6 municipalities, 6 mayors with 6 different approaches sometimes, so it's not easy. But I think the solution is to inform, help, and also guide the people into this, because it's, as you know, European funds are not easy to handle. I mean, it's sometimes it's one of the main things that keeps them aside. So that's mainly what we've done.
Thank you, and kudos to you for doing all the job on the ground. Coming back to Corina, we talked about social dialogue and how to make it more efficient in view of industrial policy, but also how to work around those good quality jobs, because we know that miners' jobs were usually pretty good, secure, and having all the benefits, but those jobs are more rare and rare. So how do you fight also for the quality jobs?
So thanks for a more global question, I would say, because I can say, I'm not presenting a specific region. Of course, we have workers in different regions, but what is very important is that the policy framework that we see on the EU level, but also on many national, regional levels, is for us, the social dimension is often only perceived as an add-on. Often, if you read a legislative file at the EU level, for instance, concerning the energy transition, there might be some consideration of skills needs, labor shortages, which is very urgent, and we see that discussion everywhere in all the regions, I think. But often the quality of jobs dimension is not really looked after. Although it's quite, in our opinion, very much linked to the labor shortages discussion, because if you want to attract workers, you need to also offer a certain quality of jobs. So what is very important for us, first of all, is having a coherent policy framework for just transition. When we looked at own analysis that the Commission did in terms of the NECPs, the first review of the draft NECPs some years ago, one of the conclusions was that there's in almost no member state there's a coherent framework put in place, which is actually quite some disturbing analysis. And if you look at the conclusion, the assessment of the implementation of the Council recommendation on a fair transition to net zero, you have a similar analysis that basically there might be a difference in the definition of what a just transition means, and there's no coherent policy framework. So for us, it's very important that if you design a policy, the social dimension must be an integral part of that. The quality jobs dimension must be an integral part of it. We, of course, welcome that now you, as part of the Clean Industrial Deal that has been presented, there is one of the initiatives will be the Quality Jobs Roadmap. But what we also expected to deliver actually on concrete measures, not only on nice narrative, but really providing and enabling workers to participate democratically in the transition. Because of course workers are not like any actors, they are very important to drive the transition, and therefore you have to involve them again, and therefore you need rights. One of those tools how to create those rights, in our opinion, is a legislative framework for the anticipation and management of change with workers. A Just Transition Directive, we also call it, where you actually give those rights to workers in terms of co-creation on a company level, for instance, of just transition plans, job-to-job transition plans, and also co-creation of, skilling and reskilling schemes at a company level, I think, and also providing for fundamental right to access to and upskilling is very important for us. And then another good tool how to lever a strong social dimension for, in our opinion, is if you link every kind of public funding, every kind of EU funding or national funding, public procurement, to social conditionalities. And in our view, social conditionalities are again also tied to the respect of workers' rights and providing more stronger rights, the right to a secure job, and the right to information and consultation at a company level, so that workers actually know where the company is heading at, and they can actually participate in the anticipation and management of change, and again a right to training. Yeah.
Thank you. I think all those things are important in jobs. We have to agree. We're a little bit behind the time, so I'll try to ask more simple questions. Pavel, I want to ask you about just transition and the regions that are in transition, how they played a historically a role, and they were important for the whole economy. So how would you maybe see now connecting the just transition agenda with things that are gaining traction and being prioritized in the European Commission, like competitiveness and the industrial policy?
In fact, the regions, they know what they need, they know their objective, and they already designed, especially this region in transition, what they want to achieve. So everything is there. It's the territorial just transition plans. And these plans are coherent together with EU funding. They also wanted to design the actions. We are going beyond the just transition funding, because just transition funding is quite limited. However, the master plan of the transition is there. It's just you have to implement it, and then in a comprehensive way, because it's not only changing jobs, but also to ensure the comprehensive development of the whole territory, together with the transport links, with the support of SMEs, not only based on a large enterprise, but you rightly mentioned that from one monoculture to another monoculture, it's not the solution. You have to really develop regions themselves. So everything is there. It's just you have to do it, and it's perfectly in line what we in fact design in the Clean Industrial Deal. There are also complementary funding, like in Innovation Fund for ETS installation. So, but we from Brussels perspective, we have to promote what is the vision of the people from the ground. It's not top down, that we know better from Brussels ivory tower what is better for territories. Territories, they know themselves. They reinvented themselves, and now they have to really just to implement. And we encourage them to speed up also implementation.
Thank you. Well, that sounds very good, that everything is in place. You just have to do it. Anya, how do we keep the momentum of, everything that's going on around energy transition and just transition at the local level? Because, people started this transition and they are a little bit worried about the future of JTF. So how do we keep momentum and keep them going, and so that they can deliver all those wonderful plans?
Well, I think there's a few ways, because funding can only do so much. I think already being visible, or making visible what has been achieved with Just Transition Fund or with other EU funds on the ground. And there's ambassadors or the mayors that can also convene that. Clear communication, but also inclusive governance. And what are some of the lessons learned that we can maybe take on for the next Just Transition Fund, if it happens, but also for the next MFF. So that's a few things that I would say. I think from my end, in terms of continuing to build public support, it's not easy, and especially in the current environment. Like the title of this event says, it's coming to your doorstep, not only with changing boilers, etc., But people really need to understand how they can benefit from it. You know, jobs, but not only. You know, how are regions and cities actually being able to gain something from this transition and from the investments and from this clean industrial deal, etc. So it's finding ways to communicate more effectively and to be more visible about the wins that we've achieved so far. Maybe not only the challenges.
Thank you. So, Alexandru, you know, transition is a highly complex process, as you already explained, so many levels and so on. How do you integrate all those various instruments, and how do you also think about industrial diversification and social acceptance?
Yeah, well, it's not an easy job, but that's why it's a job, and it doesn't come by itself. So you need to work on it. I would just like to give a little bit of insight in regards to what you mentioned, that it's very hard, for example, to change the entrepreneurial culture, for example, coming from, I don't know, mono-industrialism to something which everything was connected to the mining company or something like this, and the next day you need to be let's say on the open market, and you need to be adapted technologically, but also in terms of, I don't know, scaling from micro to small SMEs, introduce middle management, which was never a case. So it's a process which takes a lot of time. I would just give, and our job is actually to inform and give opportunities, and the framework from what I see it, is to have like a culture of give back, because what do we want? We will have a new economic system. It's going to be bigger, lower, depends not on the subsidies, mainly on the framework that we can give to the potential new investors, local or not local, to come to our area, which is very beautiful as it is at the moment. And do the stuff. But for example, for us, it was very important, first of all, to be open, informative, to have like a one contact point, not to go in 200 places in a small area. If you get a permit or something like this, you need to be, you know, things that any entrepreneur wants, you know, somebody to talk to have a honest partner. Our responsibility, and tied to what Corina said, we, for example, said to all SMEs which actually benefited from grants that they need to make a CSR project out of their own funds in order for them to, and this was actually not really a big issue for them, because they are living in the community, so they wanted to do, and we gave them some examples, and actually just creates a little bit of connection between the business itself and the community, and some of them actually proposed helping, for example, NGOs with disability, which are working with disabilities, and you have to trust them that everybody wants to. I mean, I'm a social worker again. I think that the people want to do good in their community, even if they want to do business, but they also want to have an impact in the community, especially now. And I think we can tie European funds to the CSR. Maybe, of course, the rights of the workers are very, very important. I don't even tie. I think it's mandatory, actually, if we want to be decent community. And also, what we started to say and to do is actually, because you have this big projects of repurposing a former mining area, for example, which has 10 million euros, which takes at least only 1 year to make a master plan, 1 year to make documentation, and 5 years to do implementation. What we decided actually to give micro grants in the community for smaller projects, which actually show to the community that there are things happening, and the people know that there is a process going on. Because as somebody mentioned, there are municipal or people which don't even know that under they have these opportunities and there is something happening there. So we started 100,000 euros for micro, 3,000 euros for NGOs, for different kind of small events, where we have to disseminate what it means, just transition, what it means for SME, what it means for you, what it means for you in your building. You can do, like, for example, retrofitting, you can do solar panels, you can do something like this, but we need smaller things with higher impact. Sometimes it has a higher impact at community level, because it shows that things are happening, and this is one of the biggest challenges, and this is how you can create engagement by implementation and doing stuff on the ground for the people, with the people as much as possible, because yeah, otherwise, as I mentioned, if you stay to the big projects which actually will see the results when you cut the ribbon in 10 years, now it's going to be also very frustrating. So you have to adapt smaller projects, also of course big infrastructure projects, and also I would like to say, first of all, that any strategy is a living document and it can be adapted, so changes need to be done at the community level, and I always think that the European Commission is very wishful to adapt program according to the willingness of the community, if it's good argumented, of course. This is it's normal, and this is the principle of a bottom-up approach, first of all, and second of all, in regards to the continuation, for me, because I work with families which actually change their habits in 5-10 years. As I mentioned, it would be actually from the EU level quite a big problem for our region in Geo Valley. I don't want to say about other regions, because we've started this process, and now if you say, okay, we started but it doesn't work, now we were going to cut it down, I think this would be actually a big problem, and we will go back 2 steps at least in the process of change, because it's a process of change. It will take at least 2 or 3 MFFs in my point of view. And we need to be patient with the people, because they were patient with us for so many times. Yeah, so that's it.
Okay, so my last question to the panelists. Corina, the risk for the next MFF, what if it doesn't deliver what the workers need?
So first of all, maybe I've started off a bit negative about the lack of union involvement in the TGTPs and the Just Transition Fund, but obviously the Just Transition Fund is a very important tool, because it addresses the needs at the regional level. It addresses needs for cohesion. It addresses the fact that in some regions you have a very high share of workforce in energy-intensive industries and coal mining. And this is really important, because if we do not consider that, and if we don't have own resources for really dedicated to the regional level, we risk more fragmentation. We look at the dimension, the scale of the transition, the scale of the energy transition. It is clear that we need massive funding, and if we leave it only to the countries, the member states, to put state aid on the table, then we won't get far, because at the same time we have policies for fiscal consolidation that are basically hindering member states to invest in the energy transition. So for us, it's very important to keep this strong commitment, to have resources available that also help concretely the regional level that are especially affected by the transition, which is very important. From the workers' perspective, it's very important, of course, because we also can see a direct link of continued austerity policies with in regions with a rise of populism, and this is very problematic, of course. And we see a lack of trust in democratic institutions. We see it across Europe. We see it on the world scale. And I think it's very important that that there's a signal that there's commitment, financial commitment, but also the commitment to involve, engage, and plan together, and really keep the plan ahead with a certain goal to actually create perspectives and recreate this trust. Yeah, I end it here. Thank you.
I'll ask if there are any questions from the room. Okay, I see 2. Please try to be short.
Okay, so it's been really fantastic to hear your divergence of views, because we've gone from into quite some detail on how you support individuals with this transition. But what I've realized is that we haven't had DG employment or anyone from the labor side, but we always talked about what they will need to do during the transition. One of my observations is you see public employment services is still really focused on a certain set of beneficiaries, and they need to start working towards supporting those that are in work and need to transition. Is this your perspective too?
Certainly. One of the main, again, criticisms of the work of the Just Transition platform, why we welcomed it, was that there was a lack of a role for DG employment. For us, it was obviously you have to focus on the employment dimension if you focus on the transition. So I think as such, it's very important that this improved, and DG Employment, there's also now a unit looking into the fair transition. There's also, I mean, one of the flagship initiatives of the Clean Industry Deal again is also the creation of a fair transition observatory at EU level, which is very important for us. But that's what I meant by the need for a comprehensive framework for just transition, is that you do not only look at the transition from a climate perspective, from an environment perspective, the energy perspective, the investment perspective, but that you actually look at the workers' dimension, because and the employment perspective, because employment and the share of employment is also very important. It's important for the communities. It's tax incomes as well. It keeps the communities intact. So it's very important that there is a social dimension and the employment services involved in the whole debate. And yes, it could be improved.
I just want to clarify that the point I really wanted to signal is I do think massive improvement is needed in those systems. And so I encourage Forum Energy to maybe have a follow-up conversation where we bring some of those services into the room and ask what they could do better.
If I may, just to complete the answer, actually talking about implementation, because it's good to have social policies and things like this, but when you go into implementation, I'm sorry to say this, but you need place-based, person-based approaches, because we tend to have different kind of big-scale programs of requalification, reskilling, upskilling, things like this. But there are a lot of people which actually are falling through this through the social safety net, and sometimes you just need, just like a social worker. Of course, I'm a bit subjective, but you need case management in terms of employability for the miners, because, for example, in our region, because we already have a lot of people which were laid off since the 96 we laid off people, and apart from accepting that you will be smaller as a city, this is also interesting, because everybody wants retention of people, but sometimes the solution is that the person goes away. That's a reality, and you have to accept it in order to move forward, first of all. But second of all, you need family to family, because most of the miners, actually the first step was actually depression. And depression, you can make a lot of courses for requalification and upskilling, but it will not handle the problem of making the miner and its family, which was mostly dependent on the salary of the miner, apt to embrace a new skill. So you need a lot of people, and I would suggest also in implementation phase to use also the behavioral, but also the psychologists and the social workers at the municipality level to have a place-based. I know it's a lot of resources, but this is how it has to be done, because every person and every family is unique, and you need a unique approach. That's at least my personal opinion.
Okay, we are very much after the time, so
10 minutes after.
Are you have a very urgent question, or can we ask them?
No, I cannot ask them.
Thank you. Sorry, but we can also do that afterwards. So I just wanted to sum up. The dedicated, catered support is needed for just transition, and JTF was delivering one like that. The measuring point, you know, with energy transition as such, like technical, it's very easy to calculate things. But with the just transition, the social transition, it's much more complicated, because, as you mentioned, it's like mental state of people, it's the social acceptance issue, it's much harder to put numbers on it and measure it and therefore manage it. And we should use the language of benefit to encourage people for change and basically keep the ball rolling, hoping that we'll get there at some point. Thank you very much. Thank you to the panelists.
Thank you. So once again, the picture. Okay. And thank you very much for this vivid, interesting discussion. I would like to just say that for those who would like to revise or, as Alexandru said, has some homework to do, the conference was registered and it will be published very soon on our YouTube profile. So thank you very much and see you soon.